Chapter 1, Marrying anyone doesn't matter, whether it's the sister or the younger one. Open the door. Mrs. Quinn, this matter. The hotel manager looked at the group of aggressive guests, his expression troubled. This is against the rules, the guest is still inside, stop talking nonsense. I'll take responsibility for whatever happens. Open the door. That wretched girl is inside, and I need to see for myself, catch her red-handed so she can't say a word. If you don't open the door, I'll call the police and accuse your hotel of illegal business practices. Yes, the manager shook his head and reluctantly opened the door. These people had some influence in New City and couldn't be offended. Before the door was fully opened, Helen Quinn barged in with her entourage. Vivian Quinn, look at the mess you've caused. You've disgraced the Quinn family completely. You said you were meeting a client, but you came to a place like this to discuss business. Do you even have any shame? Mother, why are you all here? Helen Quinn looked at the two people on the bed, who were in a panic, and her words got stuck halfway. What is going on here? Nina, why is it you? You and Charles. She had received information that Vivian Quinn was meeting a client at the Imperial Pavilion Hotel, and someone sent to follow her had seen her go upstairs. That's why she called several prominent ladies from the social circle, including Charles Carter's mother, aiming to catch her in the act and humiliate Vivian Quinn completely. For the Quinn family, an alliance with the Carter family was beneficial, as the Carter family had risen in New City thanks to the Ford family. However, this arrangement favored Vivian Quinn, leaving Nina out of the picture. Yet, Mrs. Carter seemed to particularly like Vivian and was determined to make her the daughter-in-law, despite the gossip and criticism from others. If Mrs. Carter witnessed her future daughter-in-law involved in something scandalous today, Vivian Quinn's marriage prospects would be ruined. But why was it now Charles Carter and her own daughter who were embarrassed? Before Helen Quinn could process the situation, Mrs. Carter's face darkened, and she sternly scolded, Charles, what on earth are you doing? Mother, please listen to me. Charles Carter flailed helplessly, but with so many people present, he was unable to get up as he wasn't wearing anything. He awkwardly clutched the blanket. Everyone exchanged bewildered glances. Just as Helen Quinn was about to explode with anger, a knock came from behind. Auntie, what are you all doing here? Vivian Quinn stood calmly at the door, her graceful figure and striking beauty catching everyone's attention. Her lips curled into a slight smile as she took a few steps forward. Not too early, not too late, she had clearly timed her arrival perfectly. Vivian, listen to me, this isn't what it looks like. Charles Carter, meeting her half-smiling gaze, hurriedly tried to stand up, but Nina Quinn quickly pulled him back, hiding in his arms. Oh. Then explain, what exactly happened? Charles Carter was at a loss for words. Helen Quinn turned around, raising her hand to slap Vivian, but Vivian swiftly caught her wrist. What are you doing, Auntie? This wretched girl is clearly seducing clients. Claiming to be discussing business but only trying to extort money. Everyone in this city knows what kind of person you are. You've brought shame to the Quinn family. How does Auntie know I came here to discuss business? If I am meeting a client, why did you bring this whole group along, even calling Charles's mother? Does that mean I'm the one who deserves to be hit? You, Helen Quinn trembled with rage, her temper flaring as she felt the urge to smash something. You're the one embarrassing yourself, Auntie. Vivian flung her hand away forcefully, casting a cold glance at the pair on the bed. Your daughter is lying on my fiancé's bed. What kind of person is she? And what kind of upbringing do you have? Or perhaps, is this exactly what you wanted? Helen Quinn was at a loss for words, unsure how to respond. Deep down, she truly wished for Nina to marry Charles Carter, but definitely not under such circumstances. Charles Carter hurriedly explained, Vivian, it's not like that. Yesterday, I happened to meet Nina at the bar. I drank a bit too much, and after that, I don't remember what happened. But the person I've always loved in my heart is only you. Love? It was clearly an utterly absurd scene, yet Vivian Quinn couldn't help but want to laugh. How blind she had been in her previous life. The man she loved with all her heart could still speak of love at this moment, despite secretly being involved with Nina Quinn for years and hiding it from her. Time and again, she had given in, always thinking her cousin was just spoiled from childhood. Who would have thought Nina could be so cruel? After covering up everything, these two stole the Quinn family's entire fortune, dumped all the debts on her, and without hesitation caused a car accident. Even after her death, they didn't let go of her last bit of value, greedily taking the insurance money. Charles, why don't you just tell her the truth? Meeting Vivian Quinn's icy gaze, Nina Quinn raised her head proudly. What's left to hide at this point? We didn't just meet by chance. Vivian Quinn, your reputation is so scandalous. What decent man in New City would even look at you? Charles and I truly love each other. Let me tell you, we've been together for a long time, and by the way, I'm pregnant. Shut up. Charles Carter broke out in a cold sweat. He and Nina Quinn had been secretly dating more than once or twice, and nothing had ever gone wrong before. Why was today so unlucky, and in front of so many people? Worse yet, Vivian Quinn was also here. He felt something was off but couldn't pinpoint what. Oh, really? Vivian's lips curled into a distinct smirk, her narrow phoenix eyes calm and devoid of emotion, making it impossible to discern her feelings. Perhaps you two should get dressed before explaining. There are so many elders here, take your time. Vivian, wait for me a moment. Perhaps surprised by her calm demeanor, Charles Carter suddenly became flustered. It's all a misunderstanding, don't listen to Nina's nonsense. I've never taken the initiative, really. And what do you call this now? Passive? Vivian Quinn brushed her bangs aside, her lips curving into a mocking smile. I was just momentarily confused. You know how it is, when you drink too much, it's easy to make mistakes. It's my fault, I admit. While hastily putting on the clothes handed to him by others, he pulled the blanket up slightly to shield Nina Quinn behind him. Vivian Quinn's eyelids twitched as she glanced at Mrs. Carter, who was standing beside Helen Quinn. Clearly, she was just as shocked, looking at Vivian without knowing what to say. Vivian sighed, Aunt, since you're here, let's make it clear. Charles Carter, from now on, consider our engagement cancelled. No. Mom, help me persuade Vivian. It was just a moment of confusion, a drunken mistake. What man doesn't make mistakes? I know Vivian is upset, but she shouldn't rush to a decision. Though angry, Mrs. Carter instinctively defended her son. Vivian, you know Charles has always treated you well. Just this once, please forgive him. I promise you nothing like this will ever happen again. Besides, your engagement with Charles was agreed upon by both families. Charles and Nina are the perfect match. As for the engagement between the two families, Vivian Quinn smiled faintly. Sisters are all the same, aren't they? Don't you think so, Aunt? Chapter 2, She Calls Me Fourth Uncle. Don't talk nonsense, Vivian. Aunt knows you've been wronged. Once we get home, I'll certainly teach him a lesson. Mrs. Carter said angrily. Compared to Nina Quinn's scandalous entanglement with her son, she naturally preferred Vivian Quinn. That's not necessary, Vivian replied, shaking her head. Her indifferent gaze swept across everyone. The drama has gone on long enough, it should end now. I have other matters to attend to. Excuse me. With those words, she turned around and left, not wanting to linger any longer. Under his mother's stern glare, Charles Carter adjusted his clothes and, without hesitation, intended to chase after her. Unexpectedly, Nina Quinn suddenly cried out in pain, my stomach hurts so much, it's unbearable. Charles. He hesitated for a moment but eventually turned back to check on her. Just as he lifted her up, intending to take her to the hospital, a group of people with cameras suddenly rushed down the hallway, aiming their lenses directly at Charles Carter and Nina Quinn, snapping photos frantically. "Young Master Carter, what's going on with the two of you here?" The situation unfolded so suddenly that he had no time to react. The disheveled appearance of both him and Nina was captured in full. Mrs. Carter glared hatefully at Helen Quinn, the mastermind who had orchestrated this setup. If she still couldn't understand the schemes of this mother-daughter duo by now, she would have lived her life in vain. "Who allowed you to come here? Stop taking pictures, do you hear me? Young Master Carter, isn't your fiancée the second daughter of the Quinn family? May I ask why you're here with the third daughter of the Quinn family at a hotel? Are you planning to switch your engagement?" "Exactly. Both families have already agreed on the engagement. Why the sudden change of heart? Why are you both at the Imperial Pavilion? Can we get an explanation?" A crowd of reporters bombarded him with questions. Helen Quinn, though initially frustrated, suddenly thought of taking advantage of the situation. However, when she turned around, Mrs. Carter had already disappeared. The noise behind her gradually faded. Vivian Quinn's eyes flickered as everything around her finally felt real. She had been reborn. How fortunate. The moment the car hit her, she felt her body become weightless, as if her soul had left her body. She saw herself lying on the ground, covered in blood, with a growing crowd of onlookers. She wanted to scream, but no sound came out. Then, a piercing car horn jolted her awake. She found herself in her office. It took her a while to regain her composure. The calendar on her desk was the one she had bought when she first started interning at the Quinn Corporation. Even the water cup was the one that had been broken before. Everything in front of her clearly indicated that she had returned to the past, to a time before she was betrayed. Vivian Quinn calmly recalled the events of her previous life. If her aunt wanted to play games, then Vivian would deliver a grand counterattack. Today's events were just the beginning. The heart-wrenching pain still seemed to linger, causing her to instinctively clutch her chest. The scene before her was both familiar and foreign. In her previous life, right in this very place, she had been betrayed by her own aunt. She was almost sent as a gift to an old pervert. Under the guise of entertaining a guest, the visitor turned out to be a notorious lecher in the city. Like a lamb to the slaughter, she was nearly devoured. Although she was rescued just in time, her life was utterly ruined. First came the rumors about her improper conduct, being expelled from school, then she was labeled as someone greedy for wealth, becoming the mistress of a wealthy man, her reputation tarnished, and no one wanted to come near her. While she hid at home, too afraid to step outside, Charles Carter proposed carrying out their engagement, saying he trusted her, regardless of what had happened before, and assured her that he wouldn't hold it against her after marriage. The entire city couldn't understand why the young master of the Carter family insisted on marrying a woman despised by society. Even the Quinn family was baffled, but they desperately needed the support of the Ford family. Being under the protection of the Ford family was a dream for anyone in the city. Clinging to the Carter family meant getting closer to the Ford family. Whatever Charles Carter's reasons were, as long as he agreed to marry her, it was enough. In such circumstances, he defied everything to marry her, and Vivian Quinn was deeply grateful. She thought she had escaped her suffering, only to fall into a deeper abyss. The sunlight outside was a bit dazzling as she stepped out, still feeling somewhat dazed. With just a few months left until her university graduation, the school she had worked so hard to get into, she was determined not to let her grandmother down. A luxury business car stopped not far from the roadside, and the people waiting in front of the grand building quickly approached it. "Mr. Ford, this way, please." She slightly turned her head, and just one glance left her frozen in place. The man stepping out of the car had a tall figure, with cufflinks on his shirt sleeves glinting a cold silver. His noble and composed aura exuded sharpness and depth. Dressed in a high-end black suit and a pristine white shirt, his impeccable appearance made him stand out even more. A few people behind him instinctively kept a safe distance as they followed him toward the building. Some people are born to command attention, natural-born leaders. Lucas Ford, the richest man in New City and the sole heir of the Ford Corporation. He passed by her, so close yet untouchable. While Vivian Quinn was still caught in a daze, a young boy suddenly ran out of nowhere and bumped into her. Her high heels caused her to stumble. Just as she was about to fall, a strong arm caught her slim waist. A hand with distinct joints, firm yet exuding elegance and courtesy. She winced in pain and, once steady on her feet, her eyes first caught sight of the platinum cufflink. Realizing who stood before her, she instinctively blurted out in mild astonishment, "Fourth uncle." "Apologies, are you all right?" The boy's mother hurried over, her face filled with guilt as she looked at the two of them. Vivian Quinn snapped out of her daze, nodded, and accepted the apology. "Can you stand properly?" A deep, clear voice rang above her, carrying a faint scent of mint. Vivian Quinn looked up, meeting a masculine face with refined features. His eyes, behind gold-rimmed glasses, were deep and unruffled, radiating calmness and sophistication. Yet her heart was in turmoil. "Thank you, sir," she said softly, stepping back to put some distance between them. Lucas Ford withdrew his hand, his gaze inevitably falling on her. Her skin was as smooth and white as the finest jade, flawless even up close. A delicate high nose, cherry-like lips, clear eyes like crystal, and a naturally bare face that left people mesmerized. Undeniably, she was a true beauty. After a brief glance, he smirked faintly, his smile barely noticeable. "You called me fourth uncle." Only the younger generation of the Ford family addressed him that way, but this girl before him, he had no recollection of her at all. She froze for a moment, thinking she had spoken softly enough, not expecting him to hear. "Apologies, I mistook you for someone else." She smiled, shaking her head, her gaze signaling toward the subordinates waiting nearby. "Thank you for your assistance, but I wouldn't want to take up more of your time." Not wanting to linger further, she turned and walked away. The Carter family had some ties to the Ford family. By hierarchy, Charles Carter would have to address Lucas Ford as uncle, something she learned only after her marriage in her previous life. A figure like him was someone she would never have crossed paths with, even after marrying into the Carter family. Yet, at her most desperate moment, it was this almost divine man who extended a helping hand to her. At that time, Charles Carter had used every means to harm her grandmother. No one in New City dared to intervene or offend the Carter family for her sake. She couldn't even manage her grandmother's funeral arrangements. But on the third day after her grandmother's passing, everything was suddenly taken care of. Her grandmother was even buried in the best cemetery in New City. The land there was exorbitantly expensive, and helping her meant antagonizing the Carter family, something no one wanted to risk. After the Quinn family's decline, she had no value left for anyone to exploit, so naturally, no one would lend her a hand. Leaving the cemetery in despair, she saw a black Bentley parked at the foot of the hill. A driver stepped out and asked if she wanted to leave New City and go abroad. "No, I don't plan to go abroad." Seeing her refusal, the driver seemed surprised. "But I will remember this kindness. May I ask, who is your master?" When the driver returned to the car, the window was lowered slightly. From a distance, Vivian Quinn saw a tall man sitting in the shadows, a faint gray smoke curling up along the side of his face. His expression or appearance was unclear, yet it made her inexplicably feel ashamed. She only remembered one thing clearly. "My master's surname is Ford. By seniority, Miss Quinn should address him as fourth uncle. Chapter 3, Rumors stop at the wise, but fools are many in this world. Lucas Ford watched Vivian Quinn's retreating figure, deep in thought, his brows slightly furrowed. "Stop staring. No matter how beautiful she is, don't look. You just returned to the country, be careful not to be deceived." Loy Zhenshi, who had been watching the hero saving the damsel scene with a meaningful expression, finally stepped forward. The two were close friends, so their conversation was more casual. "Let's head up. Do you know her?" Hearing his friend's question, Loi Jinchi sneered, clicking his tongue. "It's hard not to know. She's the top beauty of New City, one of the 3 daughters of the Quinn family, second in rank. The eldest and youngest daughters share the same mother and are considered beautiful too, but they pale in comparison to her. Unfortunately, she's an odd one. Her parents died early in an accident, a life of misfortune, bringing calamity to her father and mother. She should have been pitiful, but instead, she refused to study properly, flaunting her alluring face everywhere, seducing men. The Quinn family isn't short on money, yet she's out there doing who knows what, even causing creditors to come knocking. In the end, it was old Madam Quinn who had to step in to settle things. She hadn't been in university long before a male classmate got into a fight over her and was expelled. The boy's parents caused a scene at the school, and again, the Quinn family had to intervene to resolve it. Though her reputation is terrible, one can't deny she's breathtakingly beautiful, so she still has plenty of admirers. Currently, she holds a nominal position at the Quinn family's company, spending her days meeting clients. A beautiful woman like her, why would she ever lack business contracts? Loi Jinchi sneered, his face full of disdain, glancing at the man beside him who remained expressionless. "Don't doubt me, everything I said is true. Beautiful women from humble origins often tend to be conceited, and Vivian Quinn clearly embodied all those traits. If it weren't for the man beside him, a person who had been highly anticipated since childhood and had just returned from abroad, he wouldn't have bothered digging into such trivial gossip about a woman from idle chatter. Have you ever seen roses drenched in morning dew on the outskirts of the city? That's what she's like, so beautiful it's impossible to hide. But blooming in such a place, left for anyone to pluck, no matter how beautiful, it feels cheap. Your description is quite poetic." Entering the private elevator, Lucas Ford casually glanced at him. "It seems there's nothing you don't know." Loi Jinchi didn't bring his assistant along. "Of course. Right next door is the Imperial Pavilion. At this hour, who goes to a hotel to study? Every place has its entertainment, but with someone like her, no matter how beautiful, don't get involved. Remember my cousin? The one who was forced to study abroad by his family? It was because of her. My aunt went through a lot to cut off her son's infatuation." With no outsiders around, he loosened his collar and said meaningfully, "Don't underestimate her youth. When it comes to seducing men, she's quite the expert. Isn't the Carter family related to yours? This woman is still, on paper, Charles Carter's fiancée. Who knows, if they get married, you might have to attend their wedding, and she might end up calling you fourth uncle." Lucas Ford raised his eyes to watch the numbers change on the elevator's control panel, the corners of his lips curving into an almost imperceptible smirk, but he said nothing. Vivian Quinn hailed a cab home. Along the way, Charles Carter bombarded her with WeChat messages, calls, and texts. She had to block him to finally get some peace. As soon as she stepped into the house, the living room was filled with lively chatter and warmth. "The second young lady is back." A servant emerged from the corner of the room. "The old madam instructed that when you return, you should go see her. She has something to discuss with you." "Okay." She glanced around, and the living room immediately fell silent. Clara Quinn took the initiative to stand up and smile as she introduced everyone. "This is my younger sister, Vivian Quinn, whom I've mentioned before." "Oh my, Clara, your younger sister is much more beautiful than Nina. Truly the renowned beauty of New City, with such flawless skin, makes one want to pinch it to see if it's real." The young man spoke while sipping his tea, his gaze practically clawing at her, glued to her figure. Vivian Quinn only nodded at Clara Quinn before heading upstairs. That man, she happened to know. In her previous life, he almost became her stepson. Her eldest aunt had schemed to trap her in a hotel, intending for her to meet his father. Father and son, both cut from the same cloth. She stopped in front of the study door, took a deep breath, and knocked before stepping inside. "You're back." Margaret Quinn waved her over affectionately as soon as she saw her. "Come here and take a look at this painting with me. I've been examining it all morning and still can't determine if it's real or fake." "Grandma, I'm home." Vivian Quinn felt her nose sting with emotion and couldn't resist running over to hug her tightly. It felt so good, her grandmother was still alive. She still had the chance to make up for past mistakes and regrets. In this life, she would never allow anyone to hurt her family. "I'm back for good, Grandma. I've missed you so much." "What's going on?" Margaret Quinn didn't understand, gently stroking her granddaughter's hair. "Were you mistreated at work? Didn't you say you had a client meeting today? Did the negotiations not go well? I know it's tough for you, having to deal with the business world before even graduating college, but the company was left by your parents. You'll have to manage it someday, so you must learn sooner or later." "It's okay, Grandma." Vivian Quinn took a deep breath, savoring the familiar scent of ink on her grandmother, calming herself down. She looked at the guanine painting on the table and shook her head. "This piece is a very skillful forgery. If you don't look closely, it's hard to tell it's fake. However, it's precisely because it's too meticulous that it raises suspicion." "Really? What a pity." Margaret Quinn sighed regretfully. "Your eldest uncle had someone bring it over. Such a shame for such a beautiful painting to turn out to be a fake." She gazed at it a few more times, unwilling to let it go. "I heard the original painting was lost many years ago. The ones on the market are all fakes." Vivian Quinn helped her grandmother put the painting away, a cold glint flashing in her eyes. Her incompetent eldest uncle, along with her eldest aunt, had shown no hesitation when they joined forces against her grandmother back then. The Quinn family collapsed, and during Margaret Quinn's lowest point, they seized all the assets she had brought from her maternal family, spreading lies that she was unwell and needed to be admitted to a nursing home. In reality, they had confined her. In the end, the poor grandmother and granddaughter never got to see each other, leaving this world with endless regret. "Never mind, it's just a painting. Your father is an art connoisseur. If he were here, we wouldn't have been deceived. He could tell fake from real at a glance. And yet, your uncle," she shook her head. "Managing the company is the same, it's obvious he's incompetent." Vivian Quinn had already put the painting away, her expression calm as she helped the old woman sit down. "Don't worry, Grandma. I'll do my best to learn. This is the lifelong dedication of you and Grandpa. Vivian, your parents only have you as their daughter. I hate to see you working so hard, but no one else in the Quinn family can shoulder this responsibility. You're the smartest among the younger generation. When you get married, the Carter family might help you out, and I'll feel more at ease. Grandma, actually, Charles Carter and we've broken up." She looked at her grandmother's surprised face and continued, "He's weak and indecisive. We're not compatible." "Foolish." Margaret Quinn scolded her. "I never said he was the best man, but still," she looked at her granddaughter with a conflicted expression, her eyes flickering. Vivian Quinn knew what her grandmother was worried about. Rumors and gossip outside had already tarnished her reputation, leaving only a few families that could be considered suitable matches for the Quinns. Though people often dismiss idle talk, fools abound in the world. In her past life, having someone willing to marry her was already a stroke of luck, she wouldn't have dared to be choosy. Charles has a good family background, and his mother was your mother's childhood friend. She's always treated you well. If you married into their family, with a loving mother-in-law, Charles wouldn't dare mistreat you." Vivian Quinn leaned forward to hug her grandmother, unable to say a word. The feeling of regaining something lost was truly wonderful. In this world, the only person who genuinely cared for her, who treated her sincerely, was her grandmother. Even when outsiders slandered her, even when she was framed and fell into despair, her grandmother never abandoned her. Without her grandmother's care, this house might have long ceased to be a place for her. But in her past life, she had been too timid. Her grandmother wanted her to join the company, but she didn't dare, fearing she wouldn't be able to manage. In the end, her uncle and aunt siphoned off the company's assets, leaving her in tears, unable to do anything. Even her grandmother's funeral had to be arranged by the Ford family. Thinking of the man she had briefly encountered that day, her eyes flickered. Vivian Quinn didn't linger in the study for long. Having been given a second chance at life, she knew she had to cherish it. There was so much she needed to accomplish. She walked along the long hallway toward the third-floor bedroom. As she passed by the lounge, a hand suddenly reached out from the hallway and forcefully pulled her inside. Chapter 4, How Can You Learn Without Hitting a Few Obstacles? Vivian Quinn quickly brushed his hand away, showing no surprise at the action, and coldly reminded him, "Mr. Turner, this is the Quinn household. Please behave yourself." "So what? Who are you trying to impress with your act of being a proper lady? Spread your legs, and it's all the same anywhere. Besides, didn't you just come back from serving that old man? He's in his 50s already, could he even satisfy you? Why not try me instead?" Jason Turner reached out to touch her delicate face, his eyes filled with unabashed lust. She truly was a stunning beauty. Her fair skin was almost translucent, without a single blemish. Even though he had mingled with countless women outside, he had never encountered anyone as exquisite as her. However, the thought of her just returning from a hotel made the admiration in his eyes turn to disdain, though he still couldn't let go of his desire. She stepped back, maintaining a certain distance. Suddenly, as if recalling something, she smiled faintly and replied, "Your father, Chairman Turner, is very eager to marry me. If what you say is true, I might as well be your stepmother now. A stepmother is still a mother, isn't she? I must be fortunate to gain such a grown son. Well, that's perfect. Once the old man kicks the bucket, the entire fortune will be ours. You wouldn't even need to remarry, you'd still be Mrs. Turner. How about that?" When it came to shamelessness, Jason Turner was truly unmatched, showing no concern at all. "Honestly, how many men would dare to want you? I have a villa abroad. As long as you follow me, taking care of you there wouldn't be an issue. After all, life in New City is tough for you. My offer won't last forever. Take advantage while I'm still interested, and everything will be negotiable. They say blood is thicker than water, yet you can't wait for your father to die." Vivian Quinn smirked coldly, but there wasn't even a hint of amusement on her face. It was clear she didn't want to waste words with him anymore. "Come on, what difference does it make who you follow? You're not Clara Quinn, so stop pretending to be all noble and elegant." Jason Turner sneered, blocking her way and continuing to pester her. "Compared to that coward Charles Carter, at least I'm bold and straightforward. Do you really think he loves you?" He grabbed her wrist and blew lightly on the back of her hand. "So soft. Even your hands are this beautiful. I've heard the Quinn family isn't as glamorous as they appear. With assets like yours, you should make good use of them." Vivian Quinn frowned slightly. He seemed to know a lot. "That's none of your concern. If there's a problem, I'll handle it myself." Hearing this, Jason Turner tightened his grip on her wrist even more. "Oh, got yourself a new lover, huh? Seems like Charles Carter's been cheated on for a while now." "You're too nosy," she replied coldly, too lazy to engage further. "Clara Quinn is waiting for you downstairs. If you linger here any longer, she might start to suspect something. Giving you face, yet you still act high and mighty." Frustrated that neither soft nor hard tactics worked, Jason Turner lost his patience. Just as he finished speaking, there was a knock at the door. "Is anyone in there?" "Young Master Jason, are you inside?" Yes, I'm tired and just taking a break, he replied with a frown, his wolf-like eyes fixed on the woman before him. Vivian Quinn, there will come a time when you cry. Let's see who in New City dares to go against me. She said nothing, breaking free from his grip and walking coldly into the restroom. Jason Turner could do nothing but slam the door shut with a loud bang, startling the servants outside. Turning on the faucet, she carefully washed her hands over and over again, nearly finishing half a bottle of soap, scrubbing endlessly. Her wrist turned red, yet she still felt as if insects were crawling all over her, an unbearable sensation. Vivian Quinn wiped the water droplets off her face, her expression unchanged. The woman in the mirror possessed a stunningly beautiful face, glowing in her early 20s, a time when her beauty was at its peak. It seemed many people openly expressed their interest in her, whether she wanted it or not. They say beauty is a woman's most powerful weapon, but without matching power and status, it's just like this, always being ogled, treated as nothing more than a plaything. She let out a faint smile. The matriarch wasn't willing to let the Carter family's engagement fall into the hands of an outsider like her, scheming to pair Charles Carter with Nina Quinn. That was one thing. But it seemed the old man had long calculated everything, likely arranging a new marriage prospect for her to squeeze out every bit of value she had. Judging by Jason Turner's demeanor, it was clear he wouldn't let her go so easily. She had too many enemies to deal with, making it impossible to ensure complete safety, so she could only put in her utmost effort to maximize the benefits. Even though a woman's intuition told her that not every man was greedy for beauty. Take Lucas Ford, for example. But when people are desperate, they often develop unrealistic illusions. If they don't throw themselves into danger, how would they ever understand the vastness of the world? Vivian Quinn looked into the mirror again, this time without any hesitation. She turned around, grabbed a few tissues from the table in the lounge, calmly dried her hands, and then opened the door to step out. Unexpectedly, Clara Quinn was standing at the doorway, holding a glass of orange juice, smiling at her as if she had been waiting for a long time. "Sis, have all your guests left already? Aren't you supposed to be out performing these days? I've noticed you're staying home more often, having trouble with your career." Clara Quinn shook her head. "Not yet, they're still talking downstairs. I noticed Jason Turner hasn't come down for a while, so I came up to check if he was bothering you." "Oh," Vivian Quinn dragged her tone, glancing at the glass of orange juice in her hand before smiling and saying, "Then why did you only come up now?" "He just went downstairs." The implication was clear, if Clara were truly concerned, she would have come earlier. Using this excuse now seemed rather unconvincing. Clara Quinn hadn't expected her to speak so bluntly, leaving her momentarily at a loss for words. In the past, whatever she said went unchallenged, especially by Vivian Quinn, who had always been obedient and easy to manipulate. Since when had she become so sharp-tongued? She still wore the same gentle and smiling demeanor, but if in the past it reflected meek endurance, now there was something in her gaze that Clara couldn't quite decipher, perhaps a hint of coldness. Clara forced an awkward smile, her fingers tightening around the glass. "Jason Turner does have a bad reputation, but his father is influential and powerful. After all, this is the Quinn family's home, no matter how arrogant he is, he wouldn't dare cause trouble here." "Oh, I asked the staff to squeeze another glass of orange juice. You should try it, the oranges are imported from California, and they're delicious. If you marry him, wouldn't that mean I'd gain a brother-in-law with power and status? Then, our Quinn family could do whatever we want in Harmony City." Vivian Quinn's lips curved slightly, her fair skin glowing even more radiantly as she smiled, stunningly beautiful. Even Clara Quinn, who was usually proud and had met countless people, couldn't help but be momentarily dazed. But right after that brief moment of amazement, envy began to boil within her. Clara Quinn regained her composure and smiled gently. "Jason Turner is a few years younger than you. How could you two have anything in common? He's a much better match for you, talented and beautiful, a perfect pair. Vivian didn't respond and walked past her. Clara quickly handed her a glass of orange juice, watching as Vivian turned and headed upstairs. Clara's gaze darkened slightly. The room remained as it had always been. The Quinn family home was quite old, but thanks to their grandmother's insistence, even after several renovations, it largely retained its original appearance. The largest room, naturally, belonged to Clara Quinn, the eldest grandchild. Vivian's room, on the other hand, was the smallest and tucked away in the most secluded corner. She hadn't thought much of it before, but now, looking back, she felt as though her life had been wasted. She had neither fought for power nor caused trouble, always treating others kindly and enduring quietly. Yet, people still refused to let her live in peace. She had backed away so far that there was no retreat left, ultimately dragging even her grandmother into the mess. Chapter 5, Don't listen to her nonsense. Charles and I are genuine. Vivian Quinn held the glass of orange juice and slowly poured it into the sink. When had California oranges ever been hers to enjoy? Clara Quinn certainly knew how to play the part. If she were truly worried about Jason Turner misbehaving, would she have waited this long? Who knew what Clara had been standing by the door for? The same was true in her previous life. Clara, the eldest daughter of the Quinn family, always appeared dignified, gentle, and virtuous in public, her character flawless. Compared to her own shortcomings, Clara seemed even more noble. Vivian knew Clara was proud and self-righteous, believing that the matter between Charles Carter and Nina Quinn would at least offend her sensibilities, preventing her from doing anything to harm the Quinn family. But everyone had been wrong, including herself. The seemingly gentle and noble eldest daughter was the one with true ambition. Charles Carter was merely the visible face, while Clara operated in the shadows. When it came to dividing the Quinn family's assets, Clara showed no mercy. Her meticulous schemes deceived everyone. Vivian could still vaguely recall the one time she begged Clara for help. Clara, looking down on her with disdain, mocked her, "A little sister with such beautiful skin, if you're willing to lower your pride, why worry about not having money for grandmother's funeral? A scandalous reputation and not a penny of inheritance, that's the disgrace you brought upon yourself. Out of sisterly affection, if you kneel and beg me, I might just give you a way out, no rush, there would be plenty of time to settle those debts later." Suppressing the anger rising within her, Vivian cleaned the glass thoroughly until it sparkled before leaving the bathroom. The day's busyness had left her physically and mentally drained. Just dealing with the cunning members of her family required extreme caution, not to mention facing the ever-growing Carter family. She was currently too weak, lacking any real power, which meant every step she took moving forward had to be calculated carefully. She planned to rest for a bit to ease her exhaustion, but her mind remained hazy. It wasn't until the servant came to call her for dinner that Vivian finally woke up. Looking out the window, the sky was already darkening. "Second miss, you don't look well. Are you feeling unwell? Probably caught a cold." As soon as she opened her mouth, her voice was hoarse, and her throat burned. "It seemed she really was sick. Be careful when you go downstairs later. I noticed that Madam and the third miss looked quite upset when they returned, seemingly very angry." The housekeeper hesitated. Vivian Kai nodded, "Thank you, Mrs. Lilly." She opened the drawer. The usual medicines were down to empty boxes, and some had already expired. It had been left for so long, with no one asking or tidying up. "Tonight, I'll prepare a bowl of hot soup for the second miss to warm you up," Mrs. Lilly offered. Vivian was slightly startled, looking up at her, and asked, "How long have you been working for the Quinn family, Mrs. Lilly?" "I just started last year." The old madam mentioned that the second miss looked very tired today upon returning, and she instructed us to be extra careful. No wonder. A hint of warmth rose in her heart. Aside from her grandmother, there probably wasn't anyone else who cared for her like that. She checked her phone and noticed several missed calls, along with a considerable number of WeChat messages and texts, most of them from the Carter family. Just as Vivian Quinn was about to put her phone down to go eat, her assistant Emma Blake called, "Vivian Quinn, something has happened." "What's the matter?" "The materials we imported from KT Company in Korea have been held up at customs. With such a large quantity, I'm afraid we'll miss the delivery deadline." "Why were they suddenly held up?" "That shipment had already passed all inspections, hadn't it?" "I asked, but they didn't give a reason, only told me to wait." "But the phones we're producing are nearing their delivery deadline. Without these materials, we can't proceed." Vivian Quinn's expression immediately turned serious. She had been appointed as the product manager thanks to her grandmother's persistence. The Quinn Corporation was aiming to shift its business focus, and producing smartphones was just the first step. If something went wrong in this phase under her watch, it would be very difficult for her to continue working in the company. Customs. She thought for a moment and instantly understood the issue. So, Jason Turner dared to act so recklessly because he had planned everything in advance. That old man had extensive connections and knew all kinds of people, which was also why her aunt had tried so hard to arrange for her to come here. Power and influence outweighed age. Vivian Quinn touched the back of her hand, as if she could still feel the repulsion from Jason Turner's touch. She raised her eyes slightly before heading downstairs. "Oh, you seem quite relaxed, sleeping until now," Helen Quinn sneered as soon as she saw her. "You've caused your younger sister so much trouble. Are you satisfied now? Aunt, why don't you just say it outright? How exactly did I harm anyone?" Vivian glanced at Nina Quinn, who was holding Clara Quinn and sobbing miserably. Seeing her come down, Nina suddenly wailed even louder. "Stop pretending. Today, we were all set up by you. You even called reporters over. If I hadn't stopped them, who knows how big this mess would have been by tomorrow." Helen paused, then approached Vivian with a cold smile. "I really underestimated you. You've learned all those dirty tricks now, haven't you? Set up." Vivian Quinn felt unwell and didn't bother to force a smile while being scolded. Her gaze turned icy. Nina and Charles Carter have been involved with each other for who knows how long. Let her explain it herself. The two of them sneaked around to the point of having a child, yet still kept it hidden. Was it me who set her up? Aunt, you heard I was meeting Victor Turner, so you stormed in to catch me in the act. Was that also my scheme? The reporters caught everything, and this good news became public. Both sides got what they wanted. As for me, at this point, her lips curled into a faint smirk, and she slowly smiled. Is this really something worth bragging about? Mother, is this true? Clara Quinn stood up abruptly, looking shocked. If it were true, and the matter got out, not only would the Quinn family and the Carter family lose face, but public opinion wouldn't favor the bride's side either. Nina Quinn stopped sobbing and quickly said, "Sister, don't listen to her nonsense. Charles and I are sincere. Even though his mother prefers you, Charles has never liked you. Don't listen to her lies. Charles promised me that when the time was right, he would tell Grandma that the one he wants to marry is me." These words inadvertently confirmed Vivian Quinn's statement. Clara Quinn froze. Even if you love each other, you can't be with Charles Carter. He's Vivian's fiancé, your brother-in-law. Even if there's love, it's neither proper nor reasonable. Besides, Charles's mother would never agree. Her expression turned stern, and Nina Quinn panicked. Then, what should we do? Clara Quinn sighed. You even have a child now. What can I say to you? You've been hiding it for so long. It seems like we'll have to rely on Grandma to step in and handle this. Really? Margaret Quinn slowly descended the stairs, looking at them with a half-smile. I didn't know I needed to step in. What's the matter? Grandma, Nina Quinn tried to act coy, but as soon as she met her grandmother's sharp gaze, the words stuck in her throat. She stammered, I and Charles, Helen Quinn, seeing her hesitate, pulled her closer and scolded in a low voice, "Useless girl, all you know is how to cry. At this point, why don't you just tell the truth? What could possibly happen between you and Charles? He's your sister's future fiancé, and you're his sister-in-law. What more needs to be said?" Fully understanding the situation, Margaret Quinn was both angry and distressed for Vivian Quinn. She stepped forward and gently patted Vivian's hand. "If you've been wronged, don't endure it in silence. Your grandmother will stand up for you." Mother, Charles Carter's engagement was merely decided by his own mother. There hasn't been an engagement party, nor has it been announced to the press. That so-called engagement doesn't mean anything, Helen Quinn muttered, clearly displeased with her mother-in-law always siding with Vivian Quinn. "So that's why your precious daughter took the opportunity to interfere, isn't it?" Margaret Quinn sat down with Vivian's help. "Our Quinn family may be in business, but we come from a scholarly background. When did we start teaching our children to behave this way? Even if they haven't held a wedding, everyone in New City's high society knows Charles Carter intends to marry Vivian. And now that things have come to this, do you even have the nerve to host a party and announce it to the world?" Chapter 6, The Second Young Lady Truly Shows Her Mettle. "Mom, the past is the past, now the situation is different. Even if you don't think about Nina, the girl is already pregnant, and her belly is growing bigger by the day. This matter." Helen Quinn shot a resentful glance at Vivian Quinn before turning to flatter Margaret Quinn with a smile. "While parents' opinions are important, the key still lies in the children's wishes. Charles Carter has been with Nina for so long, which shows his sincerity. Once the baby is born, their family will probably accept Nina when they see their grandchild." Although Margaret Quinn always maintained a calm demeanor, she was nearly amused by this daughter-in-law. "You've calculated everything so thoroughly, weighing every factor. What do you need me to step in for? Let both families discuss it among themselves, there's no need for outsiders to interfere." With that, she pulled Vivian along and headed to the dining room. "Mom, that's not what I meant." Helen Quinn wanted to say more, but Clara Quinn shook her head, signaling her to stop. Everyone harbored their own thoughts, and the meal passed in a dull and tasteless manner. After finishing dinner, Margaret Quinn was about to go upstairs to practice calligraphy when Helen Quinn hesitated for a moment and called her back. "You still want to talk about Nina, don't you?" Margaret asked with a hint of impatience. "I've already said, handle it yourselves, you don't need my approval." "No, Mom, we can talk about Nina later. You know, in recent years, the company's business has been declining. Although we've tried to pivot, it hasn't been effective. If we don't find a strong partner, I'm afraid," seeing that Margaret wasn't angry, Helen continued, "Chairman Victor Turner has been divorced for many years and hasn't remarried. His connections and influence in New City could greatly benefit the Quinn family in every aspect. I was thinking, if we could form an alliance through marriage with their family, the Quinn Corporation wouldn't have to worry so much." "So, you're suggesting sending one of our daughters to marry him? Victor Turner is over 50 years old. Could you really bear to send Clara to him? I thought you were aiming for his son, but it turns out your ambitions are even higher, you're targeting him directly." Her intentions, laid bare without any tact, left Helen feeling a bit embarrassed. Margaret Quinn looked at her for a moment, then sneered, "Don't think I don't see through your schemes. You call it a marriage alliance, but if you're so open to the idea, why not consider your own daughter first? Always prioritizing benefits above all else, this is exactly why Nina ended up doing something so disgraceful. You're too short-sighted, and one day you'll regret it." The final dinner ended in a heavy atmosphere. She didn't want to linger any longer and left for the study without waiting for Helen Quinn to speak. Nina Quinn, anxious about her marriage, didn't dare say more and followed Clara Quinn to her room to figure something out. The large living room was left with only Vivian Quinn. She thought about visiting her grandmother in the study but, recalling the shipment that still had no storage space, decided not to disturb her further and returned to her room instead. As soon as she entered her room, the phone rang. An unfamiliar local number appeared. Vivian Quinn's slender fingers swiped across the screen, and Jason Turner's mocking, angry voice came through. "Well, Miss Second Daughter, looking quite composed, aren't you? Taking so long to answer the phone." As expected, it was him. She hadn't anticipated he'd find her this quickly. "Mr. Turner, did you call just to mock me? I thought you'd be generous enough to let our shipment clear customs." "Vivian Quinn, aren't you always so arrogant and capable? Need my help now?" "Mr. Turner, you must be joking. Where are you?" "I'll come to see you," she said calmly, clenching her hand. "If there's any misunderstanding, it's better to clarify in person." She changed her clothes and went out, taking a while to locate the Upper District Club Jason Turner had mentioned. Victor Turner, the president of the Harmony City Trade Federation, owned numerous businesses, and this high-end club was just one of them. The location was discreet, but inside, it revealed an opulent setting. After hearing her purpose, the staff led her to the B2 basement level, where the billiards area was. The place was quite crowded tonight, with a lively atmosphere. Though it was on the B2 level, the space was expansive, well ventilated, and situated in a prime location. Sofas were placed along the entrance for guests to rest, while the center housed transparent VIP rooms separated by glass partitions. Designed in a modern Nordic style, the venue could accommodate 200 to 300 people. The lighting inside seemed specially adjusted, bright only in areas with significant activity, while the rest remained dim. Adding to the haze was the smoke from cigarettes. Vivian Quinn scanned the area, vaguely making out figures of men and women. In the distance, someone seemed to have just made an impressive shot, prompting whistles from those around. The light at the farthest table was noticeably dimmer, yet she immediately recognized him by his refined and elegant silhouette. He wore a light-colored shirt with the sleeves casually rolled up, no vest, and naturally, no tie. His gaze carried a hint of coldness and indifference as he leaned back against the chair in a relaxed manner, seemingly unbothered by the surrounding noise, creating a world of his own. The seat was directly facing the entrance. Even through the faint haze of smoke, the dim lighting, and the overlapping figures, she could picture his demeanor, accompanied by that refreshing scent of mint. Even in the shadows, the man exuded a radiant aura, Lucas Ford. Vivian Quinn walked straight to the liveliest table. The game seemed to be reaching a thrilling climax, with everyone holding their breath and watching intently. Jason Turner, brimming with pride, swung his cue with an air of confidence and arrogance. The crowd erupted in cheers, mostly filled with words of admiration. The woman beside him exaggerated even further, her eyes wide as she bent forward to watch closely, her ample chest on full display, clapping while feigning shyness. All right, it's just a few balls. Acting like you've never seen this before. But since I'm in a good mood today, I'll cover the late-night snacks for everyone," Jason Turner declared, though his gaze quickly shifted to Vivian Quinn. She wore a light-colored chiffon shirt dress with a dark fabric belt that accentuated her tall and slender figure. Perhaps in a rush, her long hair fell slightly disheveled, revealing a delicate, jade-like face and naturally rosy lips. Just standing there, she made the so-called flamboyant charm around her seem gaudy and cheap. "You're quite skilled at billiards, Mr. Turner. I wonder if I could trouble you for a few minutes." Vivian calmly stepped in front of him, ignoring the scrutinizing stares around her with poise and composure. Well, a distinguished guest. Isn't this the second young lady of the Quinn family? What a rare sight. No wonder Mr. Turner's been winning non-stop tonight. It turns out he had an appointment with a beauty to keep him motivated. Ha ha ha, someone recognized Vivian Quinn and seized the chance to tease her. However, she remained unruffled, her face serene, her lips curving into a polite smile, exuding grace and calm. "Everyone says the Quinn family is full of beauties. If we'd known the second young lady was coming, why would we have bothered inviting our girlfriends? Now that you're here, we're all just a joke." Tonight, Just treating us to snacks won't cut it, Mr. Turner. You'll have to throw in a Thai massage session too. Every man in this city wants to get acquainted with the second young lady of the Quinn family. Only Mr. Turner was quick and sharp enough to claim the prize first. The women, being compared so directly, were visibly displeased, muttering, "Who knows if he's even the first? Who can tell how many hands she's passed through already? So what if she's beautiful? Acting like we've never seen a woman before." The remarks grew increasingly offensive, their gazes at Vivian Quinn becoming more brazen, punctuated by bursts of crude laughter. "Just say it straight, I'm busy." Jason Turner's tone was harsh, still holding on to the events of this afternoon. Though a flicker of unease stirred within him, he merely cast her a fleeting glance before quickly averting his eyes. Clearly, this wasn't going to be an easy conversation. Vivian Quinn, of course, understood that he had deliberately summoned her here and wouldn't let her off so easily. He wasn't satisfied earlier today, and now, on his turf, he could do as he pleased. Letting those people humiliate her before stepping into feign intervention, wasn't that just his way of putting her in her place? She paused for a moment. The Quinn Corporation's goods are currently being held at customs. I hope young Master Turner can be generous enough to overlook it this time. Chapter 7, Now That You're in my hands, you still want to escape. Dream on. Even though she had just been humiliated moments ago, she remained calm and amicable, clearly stating the purpose of her visit. The company's goods being held at customs, what does that have to do with me? I'm not in charge, so why should I care about such trivial matters? Jason Turner lazily puffed on his cigarette, feigning ignorance. Humph, your old lady insisted on letting you handle the new project. With skills like yours? Really? Oh, come on, young Master Turner. The second miss herself has come to your door, you should at least show some courtesy. Turning away a beauty like her, who's really losing out here? You may not be in charge, but Chairman Turner knows plenty of people who are, another man interjected, smirking. When that happens, if young Master Turner refuses, we certainly won't be polite about it, the man added. It was the first time this man had met Vivian Quinn. Initially, he thought the rumors were exaggerated. How could there be so many stunning beauties in the world? Most were just overhyped, at best decently attractive. But seeing her today truly opened his eyes. No wonder the Turners had gone to such lengths to lure her out, she was indeed a rare beauty. You're so good at playing the nice guy, if you're so capable, why don't you step up? Jason Turner glared at the talkative man. The woman standing beside Jason had already been annoyed for a while. Why was it that the moment Vivian Quinn entered, all eyes were on her? Seeing that Jason Turner wasn't going to let Vivian Quinn off easily, the woman came up with an idea. The second miss is here asking for help, yet she's still acting so high and mighty. How inappropriate. Young Master Turner isn't a relative of yours, why should he step in for you? Besides, with so many friends, doesn't the second miss understand even the most basic courtesy? How about this, drink 3 glasses first, then we'll talk. I've heard the second miss has an excellent tolerance for alcohol, always hanging out at bars, never getting drunk even after 1,000 drinks. The crowd erupted into laughter again. Her words were clearly mocking Vivian, insinuating she was indecent and of poor character. Vivian Quinn had already experienced death once. The words meant to isolate and belittle her in her past life were far harsher than these. Such taunts and sarcasm were nothing to her now. If she had come here, how could she not anticipate their tricks? She raised her head and said, so if I drink 3 glasses, will young Master Turner release the goods tomorrow? Jason Turner casually tossed his golf club to a servant and swaggered over to Vivian Quinn. Catching a faint whiff of her delicate fragrance, his throat tightened, and he suddenly felt parched. For the first time, he envied his old man's power and influence, everything good seemed to land in Victor Turner's hands first. But now, he was still under Victor's control. No, this girl. Even if she really ends up marrying that old man, he had to have a taste of her first. Drink first, and then we'll talk. Wait until I'm in a good mood, then anything is negotiable. He leaned in close like a scoundrel and lowered his voice, saying, now that you're in my hands, don't think you can escape. Just wait and see how I deal with you. There'll come a time when you'll be begging me in tears. Vivian Quinn sidestepped slightly, grabbing a billiard cue nearby, deftly avoiding his lecherous gesture. Power and influence, such people could trample on anyone they wished. The weak, no matter where they were, could only be bullied, without even the strength to resist. This was the harsh reality. I'm not very good at drinking, but I'm decent at billiards. I noticed that young Master Turner has some skills as well. Why don't we have a match in front of everyone? If I win, you'll return the goods to their rightful owner tomorrow. How about that? She circled the table, lightly tapping a ball with her finger, smiling. Just you. Jason Turner sneered, waving dismissively. What a waste of effort. You're just stalling for time. Vivian Quinn, let me be blunt, if you behave, I won't have the heart to do anything to you. But if you don't know your place, don't blame me for losing patience and dealing with you directly. Is young Master Turner scared? Afraid of losing to a woman? How will you face your friends and hold your head high after that? As soon as she finished speaking, everyone exchanged knowing glances. Jason Turner gritted his teeth. Fine, fine. I want to see what you're capable of. If you win, I'll call immediately and won't make things difficult for you anymore. But if you lose, besides serving me, you'll also strip off all your clothes here to entertain everyone. From then on, whenever I summon you, you'll be my slave. Furious, he kicked the table hard and shouted, hurry up and clear the table. The atmosphere instantly heated up. Everyone here was a spoiled rich kid well versed in indulgence, and Jason Turner was no amateur. For the second daughter of the Quinn family to make such a demand in front of everyone was a direct challenge. Either she was truly hiding her talents or she was desperate. Regardless of the outcome, tonight promised to be entertaining. Mr. Ford, leaving already? Not staying to watch the excitement. Hearing that form of address, Vivian Quinn turned around to see Lucas Ford holding his phone, as if he'd just stepped out onto the balcony and returned. Their eyes met, and he paused briefly before saying to the person beside him, just a kid's game. I'm not interested. Coming here had been a spur-of-the-moment suggestion by Loy Dan Chi. He hadn't intended to bother anyone, but as it turned out, he'd been held up by the ancestor at home and still hadn't managed to leave. Perhaps only that person in the world could so nonchalantly leave him hanging. The man casually picked up his coat, his tall and straight figure exuding an effortless elegance, without a trace of old age. But whatever he said, the others could only agree. To leave through the main door, this was the only way, and he was already approaching. Vivian Quinn gently blinked her long, curly lashes and smiled beautifully before suddenly speaking, "Fourth uncle, what a coincidence." Her voice, sweet and clear as if imbued with magic, silenced the surroundings. The once noisy and bustling crowd immediately quieted down. All eyes turned to one focal point, unable to look away. Those who had never met him were stunned by the indescribable and extraordinary aura of this man, a charisma that demanded admiration. A few who recognized Lucas Ford's identity exchanged bewildered glances. They had never heard of any connection between Vivian Quinn and him. How could someone from the Quinn family address him as fourth uncle? What made them even more cautious was Lucas Ford's demeanor. He smiled faintly, paused his steps, and waited leisurely for Vivian Quinn to continue. This marked the first time the two had faced each other directly. The man's deep, dark eyes seemed to understand everything, yet also appeared detached, as if waiting for her in serene patience. Unlike the fair-skinned, delicate young men often seen, Lucas Ford exuded an air of outdoor vitality. Today, he wasn't wearing glasses, shedding his scholarly look for a more rugged charm. Even though he said nothing and showed no reaction, Vivian Quinn unconsciously felt much calmer, dispelling her earlier unease. It was as if, in a past life, he had simply sat in his car watching her from afar without a word, yet that small, seemingly insignificant kindness from him had been enough to warm her entire existence. At this moment, as she looked into his eyes, she was momentarily dazed. In her haze, it felt as though two lifetimes overlapped. This man, who had only briefly crossed her path, inexplicably inspired her trust. Since this is a bet, to ensure fairness, feeling more confident, Vivian Quinn slightly raised her eyebrows and smiled mischievously, like a sly little fox. I'd like to trouble fourth uncle to flip a coin for us to decide who plays first. Does anyone have objections? There are other ways to start. Why insist on flipping a coin? Jason Turner's girlfriend, seemingly intent on stirring trouble, immediately questioned her. Vivian Quinn casually picked up a ball, rolling it lightly between her fingers. Players hit the cue ball from the starting line toward the black ball spot. Whoever's cue ball rebounds closest to the starting line gets the first turn. To save time, we can keep it simple, rock paper scissors or a coin toss would work just fine. She raised her eyes inquisitively. Fourth uncle, what do you think? Given the Ford family's status and his own position, as long as he nodded, no one would dare to oppose. As long as people believed their relationship was extraordinary, petty individuals like Jason Turner wouldn't dare act recklessly, nor would they easily resort to despicable means. However, there were risks involved. If Lucas Ford refused to cooperate with her little ploy, what awaited her would be nothing less than a storm. Vivian Quinn understood clearly that compared to her gamble with Jason Turner, this moment demanded her full focus. Beauty always has a way of bringing joy and comfort. During their daytime encounter, the girl before him had been lively and clever, her actions measured, leaving a faint impression on Lucas Ford. At this moment, however, her delicate brows carried a different kind of aura. Yet her gaze remained incredibly pure. It was as if, should he wish, he could see through all her thoughts and most hidden secrets. Recalling what Lei Junshi had said earlier in the day, Lucas Ford unconsciously furrowed his brows. Everyone was watching. Jason Turner stared intently at the two, clearly not believing Vivian Quinn's words. But unexpectedly, right after that. Chapter 8, Who Says the Second Miss of the Quinn family is incompetent? The distinguished man suddenly tilted his head, catching Jason Turner's doubtful gaze, and said calmly, "Bring me a coin." His tone was composed yet incredibly decisive. Jason Turner clearly couldn't believe it. First, he was astonished, then indignant. He had never heard of Vivian Quinn having any connection with someone of such high status. Could it be that she had succeeded? If Vivian Quinn were to align herself with Lucas Ford, wouldn't his plans be? She let out a quiet sigh of relief, knowing she had won the gamble. As they conversed, someone brought over the coin. Jason Turner discreetly observed the two, hesitant to speak, as if trying to figure out their relationship. The person who had earlier boasted about his father being a big shot could no longer hold back. However, compared to his previous arrogance, he now spoke with much more respect. No wonder the second miss dared to come here alone. Turns out, you have him backing you up. We were just wondering how you, having just returned to the country, could know the second miss so quickly. Meeting here must be fate, right? Others chimed in with laughter, attempting to probe further but not daring to overstep. Lucas Ford neither confirmed nor denied anything, his mysterious demeanor making him even harder to read. With a graceful flick of his slender fingers, the coin landed steadily before being covered by his hand. I guess it's heads, Vivian Quinn spoke first. Jason Turner shrugged indifferently, I say tails. He opened his hand, and it turned out to be heads. She glanced around, her smile growing even brighter. Looks like my luck is pretty good. Compared to her earlier polite smile, this one was clearly more genuine, her eyes sparkling like stars. It brought to mind the phrase, bright eyes full of charm, a radiant demeanor, a soft smile as captivating as 100 beauties. At this moment, even Jason Turner dared not entertain any improper thoughts. Lucas Ford casually chose a nearby sofa to sit on, crossing his legs and resting his hands lightly on the armrests, as if the recent events had nothing to do with him. Seeing that he remained, the faces of those who had caused trouble earlier turned even more unpleasant. Vivian picked up a cue stick, her full attention focused on the table. She cleaned the tip of the cue, bent down, and with a crisp crack, the cue ball scattered, and a red ball fell into a pocket. Then, she took another shot, the cue ball rolling precisely toward the yellow ball with perfect angle. Jason Turner dismissed it, thinking these shots weren't difficult, anyone with basic skills could make them. As expected, the shot was precise, and the yellow ball sank neatly into the pocket. Those who initially wanted to watch the drama unfold now looked at Vivian differently. At first, they thought she was just making excuses to stir trouble, but seeing her practiced movements, it was clear she wasn't just bluffing. Anyone who frequently played billiards could tell from how someone held the cue whether they were skilled or not. Her strokes were smooth and fluid, as natural as flowing water and drifting clouds. It seems the second lady of the Quinn family isn't as rumored outside, at least she has some skills. Lucas Ford took out a cigarette, and someone immediately bent down respectfully to light it for him. Jason Turner looked a bit anxious. Was he waiting for someone? Planning to watch until the end before leaving? On the contrary, Vivian Quinn became more and more engrossed, her skills turning increasingly adept. No one knew she could play billiards, let alone that she was so good at it, not even her grandmother. Ladies from prestigious families rarely spent time learning such things. In the Quinn household, where no one valued her, no one cared what she learned. Out of the corner of her eye, she noticed him smoking. Unlike his dignified and stern demeanor during the day, he now seemed so relaxed, so leisurely. The scent of his cigarette carried a unique fragrance, not unpleasant, with wisps of light gray smoke curling upward. Perhaps because she was bent over playing billiards, her angle of view made his figure appear even more enigmatic. Through the haze of smoke, his expression was hard to read, and Vivian Quinn suddenly wanted to know why he had helped her in a past life. With his status, he could have easily stood by and done nothing. Just like tonight, he could have completely refused her. Yet, he stepped in. Jason Turner stood there sweating profusely, as if sitting on pins and needles. He had been so confident of victory. Securing the Quinn family's shipment had taken him much effort to persuade the old man, and he knew Helen Quinn wanted to marry off her granddaughter here. Tonight, he had focused solely on scheming to trap Vivian Quinn, never expecting Lucas Ford to show up. But the old man had repeatedly warned him not to offend anyone from the Ford family. The Ford family held an unparalleled status in New City, and no one could compare, especially the man before him, who happened to be the heir of the Ford family. He slightly regretted choosing this location so carelessly. Now, he still didn't know the relationship between the two of them and wasn't sure if he had already offended this man. The crowd, which had been rowdy moments ago, fell silent. Watching Vivian Quinn play more and more skillfully, they guessed Jason Turner's plans were about to crumble. Who would have thought the second lady of the Quinn family, whom everyone looked down upon, would deliver such a performance, not only skilled at billiards but also acquainted with Lucas Ford? What would happen in a moment was hard to predict. Both sides advanced and retreated, though most of the time, family connections earned some leeway. Even so, Jason Turner's skill wasn't bad. But in comparison, Vivian Quinn's precision in movement and shot accuracy clearly outshone his. Coupled with his constant concern over Lucas Ford's attitude, his psychological state was affected, leading to utter defeat. Soon, the situation became clear. Vivian Quinn kept scoring points, and over half of the balls had been cleared. Just as the game was reaching its conclusion, Lucas Ford's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and leisurely extinguished his half-smoked cigarette. She watched him walk out, and in that fleeting moment of distraction, she missed her shot. Vivian Quinn silently regretted it but quickly regained her composure. How could she forget? This match was a rare opportunity, she could only win, losing was not an option. No matter how lucky one might get, never rely on others to help you a second time. She took out the golden ball, carefully wiped it clean with a chamois, and placed it back in its spot, cautiously observing the current situation. Initially, she planned to use her ball-handling technique to push the black ball away, creating a favorable path for her next shot. However, if she couldn't control the force well, she might inadvertently create an opportunity for her opponent while leaving herself stuck. Or perhaps, she could set up an obstacle for him instead. Aiming precisely, she struck the cue ball forward with force. The cue ball brushed past the black ball, spun beautifully thanks to the rebound, and rolled behind the pink ball, settling neatly. The two balls edged close to the table's border. Vivian Quinn exhaled lightly, put the cue down, and stepped back. Impressive, I really underestimated her. Exactly. That shot must have taken a lot of practice. Playing on an away field yet staying so composed, looks like the second daughter of the Quinn family isn't the useless person the rumors claim her to be. Jason Turner cursed under his breath. Today, he had completely lost face. How could he show off to anyone again after being defeated in front of everyone by a scandal-ridden girl? The more he thought about it, the angrier he became. Seeing this, the woman accompanying him quickly tried to console him. Young Master Turner, don't be upset. Get lost. Threatened, the others dared not say anything more and stepped aside. In contrast, Vivian Quinn remained standing tall, her elegant posture and calm demeanor in such a situation made people see her in a different light. In the final moves, Jason Turner wanted to end the match quickly and switched to a fast stroke. Vivian saw an opportunity and was about to hit the ball when someone nearby called out, "Young Master Turner," a call from the chairman. "Wait, can't you see I'm busy?" The chairman insists you take the call now, his tone doesn't sound very good. Chapter 9, The key to silencing others lies in strength, damn it. Jason Turner couldn't hold back a curse. Not only did he fail to save the ball, but his own shot caused it to fall into the pocket. There was no need to continue the game, Vivian Quinn had won. Young Master Turner, you've admitted defeat. I hope you'll keep your word. She wiped her sweat, her expression calm, showing no excessive joy over the victory. Because she understood clearly, it was the Ford family that the Turner family feared, not her. As Lucas Ford left after taking the call, Victor Turner called shortly afterward. The timing was too coincidental, it only took a little thought to understand the key connection. There was no need to provoke Jason Turner further. I stand by my word. Vivian Quinn, you're impressive. Today, I was outplayed by you, bad luck for me. But remember this, there's always someone stronger. Next time, don't let yourself fall into my hands. Jason Turner was so furious he nearly threw his phone. The duck that was almost in his grasp flew away, what a shame. Vivian Quinn said nothing, and before she could turn away, a club staff member hurried in, placed a coin down, and approached her. Miss Quinn, it's getting late. Mr. Ford is waiting for you. His voice wasn't loud but clear enough for everyone to hear. Those who had intended to approach Vivian Quinn as she left immediately dropped the idea. Vivian Quinn was momentarily stunned. With Lucas Ford's sharp insight, he surely knew about her small maneuvers. He had already extended her a significant favor earlier, so why now? Though puzzled, she knew this wasn't a place to linger. She nodded, thank you. Offering a polite smile to everyone, she walked out. The remaining crowd erupted into murmurs. There were many sharp-minded individuals present, if they still didn't understand, they would be fools. Who was Lucas Ford? To suggest that he and Vivian Quinn had no connection was simply unbelievable. Jason Turner, after finishing his call, looked utterly grim. The elder on the phone had been very clear, The goods must be returned to the Quinn Corporation immediately, and under no circumstances should anyone offend the Ford family. Impressive, truly impressive. Vivian Quinn has surprised me. Isn't she supposed to have a scandalous reputation? How did she end up connected to that figure from the Ford family? Didn't you hear her call him fourth uncle? She's the fiancée of Charles Carter. By seniority, Charles Carter should address Lucas Ford as fourth uncle, yet she hasn't even married yet. TSK, such a display, as if she wants everyone to know. Humph, calling him fourth uncle so intimately. Who knows, maybe she doesn't want to become the Carter family's young mistress but rather the Ford family's fourth aunt. Jason Turner's girlfriend spoke with a sour tone. Why didn't she have such luck? Without much effort, Vivian had connected with such a top-tier man. Shut up. All of you, shut up. Are you happy seeing me humiliated? A loud crash rang out as Jason Turner's brand new phone shattered into pieces. His face darkened, this grudge was now firmly planted. Stepping out of the exclusive guest passage, Vivian Quinn paused. She wasn't wrong, Lucas Ford being outside was merely an excuse. That man was too meticulous, even when he had to leave, he had already ensured everything was properly arranged. But tonight's goal had been achieved, and as for other matters, there was no need to rush. Politely declining the staff's offer to escort her, she turned and exited the club. The night breeze was faint, and the sky had turned pitch black, though the streetlights shone brilliantly. She tried to recall where she had parked, walking as she brushed away a few stray strands of hair that fluttered against her cheek. She gently tucked them behind her ear, revealing her slender neck and delicate features. The traffic light at the intersection ahead had just turned red. Miss Quinn. While waiting at the red light, Assistant Chija, seated in the driver's seat, suddenly spoke up. It wasn't that he had an exceptional memory, but earlier in the day, Lucas Ford stepping in to assist her had left a deep impression. Moreover, Vivian Quinn's striking appearance was hard to forget. If he remembered correctly, when they had arrived at the club to pick up Lucas Ford earlier, his boss had seemingly instructed the club to ensure she got home safely. So why was she still here? The man, who had been resting with his eyes closed, suddenly opened them and looked out through the windshield. A stunning figure stood out amidst the night breeze, naturally catching his attention. Glancing at his watch, he frowned slightly. Vivian Quinn rubbed her arms, slightly regretting parking her car a bit too far. Suddenly, a car's headlights flashed by, and a black Bentley came to a stop beside her. Her heartbeat unexpectedly quickened, as if sensing something. The rear window of the car slowly rolled down, revealing the mature and handsome face of a man. His sharp features were even more striking from the side profile. It was as though time had peeled back its layers. This time, there was no mist obscuring her view. Yet, this only made the man before her seem even more enigmatic. He was the one who had left first, and now, he was the one who appeared again. They didn't send a car for you. Lucas Ford's deep voice carried no trace of emotion. She hadn't expected him to say that, and she wasn't sure if she felt disappointed or relieved. She simply shook her head. I told him to leave. Before he could respond, she lowered her head like a junior admitting a mistake. Thank you for tonight, Lucas. I'm really sorry about what happened at the club earlier. His hand, mid-motion as he wiped it, paused. His calm, probing gaze swept over her without the slightest ripple of emotion. Not calling me fourth uncle anymore. She froze, meeting his dark, piercing eyes. Lucas Ford's expression was indifferent, laced with a hint of arrogance. The slight curve of his lips softened his innate aloofness, yet it still exuded an invisible pressure. That intense pressure enveloped her in an instant. If it had been before, Vivian Quinn might have been at a loss for words. But being this close, the faint scent of mint mixed with the familiar smell of tobacco on him instead calmed her. She looked directly at him. The contours of his face were even more defined, rugged, and strikingly handsome. Not yet 30, he was already the most outstanding figure in this city. "Then why did you let me take advantage of you?" she countered instead of answering. "What do you think?" he replied casually. "Perhaps it was a bit warm in the car." He set the handkerchief aside and casually unbuttoned the second button of his shirt. From this angle, Vivian could clearly see the skin from his neck down. As she had guessed, it was toned and firm. She quickly averted her gaze, her ears slightly warm. "Whatever the reason, it's definitely not because of my looks," she said, clearing her throat to mask her awkwardness. She raised a hand to touch her face. "So, no matter what they said tonight, don't take it seriously." Lucas Ford chuckled. The woman before him was indeed breathtakingly beautiful, but her shy and endearing demeanor left him momentarily unsure of how to respond. No matter how much she tried to appear mature, at the end of the day, she was still just a young girl. Appearance is determined by nature, whether beautiful or not, it's no one's fault. "So, what others think shouldn't be a burden to you," he paused briefly before asking, "Are you still in university?" "Yes, just a few more months until graduation, right here in this city, at New City University." He raised an eyebrow. "What's your major?" "Chinese language and literature," Vivian Quinn smiled. "I might not be particularly smart, just hard-working, which is why the new project I've taken on is riddled with problems." Back during the college entrance exams. Her expression darkened. If it hadn't been for Clara Quinn's sabotage, she could have gotten into a better school. "Let's not talk about that anymore. Earlier, I was worried about how to explain everything." She softened her tone and said, "Honestly, if I hadn't run into you, I wouldn't have known how to get out of that situation." Lucas Ford simply replied, "New City University is a good school. A girl who's willing to study is far more important than just having a pretty face. Though it might be a bit inappropriate for me to say this to you, the key to silencing others is, in fact, competence." Vivian Quinn visibly breathed a sigh of relief. His words indicated he didn't mind her earlier small actions. She smiled warmly. "Thank you, Mr. Ford, for your guidance and assistance. I'll remember that." He nodded, then suddenly said, "You've thanked me twice today. Are you only going to express it with words?" Chapter 10, No man in New City would ever need her. He had a pair of beautiful eyes, jet-black pupils that exuded authority when not smiling, yet radiated a gentle, pure charm when he did, a beauty beyond words. "How could that be?" "I'm always free, just worried about wasting your precious time," Vivian Quinn said with a sincere smile. She keenly noticed that Lucas Ford's gaze toward her had softened, as if unintentionally closing the gap between them. Such a good opportunity was, of course, not to be missed. In truth, her admiration at this moment wasn't feigned. She genuinely wanted to become someone capable of handling everything on her own. As they were talking, his phone vibrated again. Vivian Quinn tactfully said, "If you have something to attend to, I won't keep you any longer." He squinted. He knew this sly girl was trying to slip away after taking advantage of him. Not wanting to trouble him, she pointed to the distance and smiled politely, "I drove here myself. I'll thank you properly another day, Mr. Ford." Lucas Ford stayed silent, ignoring the call. Vivian Quinn couldn't understand why he hadn't left yet. She brushed her hair back and blinked, intending to walk away. Being smart and dynamic is good for a woman, but sometimes even small schemes need caution, especially when the other party is someone like Jason Turner. If you have an engagement with Charles, there are some things you can let him handle for you. Vivian Quinn froze, swallowing the words she was about to say. It was because when he said this, his dark eyes were deep, his expression particularly gentle. To be more precise, it was calm. Perhaps tonight, he was quite at ease. He wore nothing ostentatious except for a modest, sleek wristwatch. His simplicity left no room for excess, yet even his smallest gestures effortlessly captured the attention of others. This calmness stemmed from an innate strength, requiring no embellishment, yet making it hard for anyone to refute him. Watching the Bentley disappear into the distance, she lowered her gaze, and the smile on her face faded completely, restoring her cold demeanor. His advice might have been mere concern from an elder to a younger generation, worried she might stray down the wrong path. But for someone constantly under threat, living in danger like her, there had never been many choices from the start. Thus, she could only keep moving forward. Lucas Ford, the air still seemed to linger with his distinctive scent, and she unconsciously thought of this name, her eyes glinting with a peculiar light. Thinking back to her past self, she once believed Charles Carter would bring happiness for the rest of her life. As long as he accepted her, no one else would matter in her eyes. If not for those incidents, she would still be a weak, foolish woman, left at the mercy of others. Times have changed, destiny works in mysterious ways. Getting into the car to relax, Vivian Quinn finally felt her body's discomfort. When she woke up this afternoon, there were already signs of a cold, and now she was shivering, likely running a fever. Earlier, she had focused all her energy on dealing with Jason Turner and then had to manage Lucas Ford. Now, as she let out a sigh of relief, all the discomfort came crashing down. Inside the sealed car, the air felt stifling and oppressive. She patted her cheeks, trying to focus on driving home. "You're back." The person who opened the door was someone she never expected. He smiled warmly, as if he was in his own home. Vivian couldn't believe Charles Carter had the audacity to show up so blatantly. Before she could throw any sarcastic remarks his way, she heard someone calling him from the living room. She understood instantly, he wasn't here to apologize but to look for someone else. Catching Vivian's gaze, he forced an awkward smile, feeling that the woman before him was a stranger, completely different from the one he once knew. Her appearance was the same, but her eyes were now chillingly cold. "Vivian, let me explain." "Oh, you're back, Vivian. A young lady like you, running off late at night without a word, worrying the whole family until now. This girl, so used to her freedom, it's hard to say anything. Girls growing up and enjoying going out is normal, but at least call home to inform us." Helen Quinn raised her voice, lecturing her in a tone full of reproach, implying that Vivian was irresponsible and reckless. "Charles has been here for a while. He said he tried calling you, but couldn't get through, and even his messages were blocked. Honestly, what kind of behavior is that? I don't think there's anything left to say. Everything that needed to be said, I made clear at the hotel earlier today." Vivian maintained the polite demeanor of a younger person but showed no submissiveness in her response to the older woman. "Vivian, haven't you understood my feelings all this time? This was just an accident, I swear. I know I've wronged you, I was just momentarily foolish." He placed his hands on her shoulders, his face serious and sincerely apologetic. "Things have come to this point. Dragging it out further only proves you're a selfish, greedy, and irresponsible man. Charles Carter, did you come here to apologize to me, or to discuss marriage plans with your mother-in-law?" She slowly brushed his hands off, noticing his tense, slightly haggard expression and the gloom on his face. He must have faced quite a scolding after returning home. But what did that have to do with her? "My mother, you know her, she's always been very fond of you. Even though Nina is pregnant, she still can't accept her. She said that unless you forgive us." "Vivian, Charles Carter spoke while carefully observing her expression. Seeing no visible reaction, he let out a sigh of relief. "So, after all this roundabout talk, this is what you wanted to say." Vivian Quinn saw through his act completely. Pretentiousness and false sincerity, wasn't playing the righteous gentleman his specialty? "I never wanted to hurt you, not even once," Charles Carter hurriedly explained, his gaze meeting hers, which seemed to see through everything. He could only awkwardly lower his head. "Your mother and mine were best friends. She always treated you like her own daughter. Before your mother passed away, she entrusted you to my mother's care. That's why she was so insistent on you marrying into our family. My mother often said that you were so pitiful, losing both parents at such a young age, and she told me to take good care of you. But Vivian, familial love is familial love, it cannot be confused with romantic love. If that's the case, why didn't you make it clear earlier? If this hadn't been exposed this time, when were you planning to say something? Her voice was soft, not sounding accusatory but rather comforting. A secret like this can't be hidden forever. The bigger it grows, the harder it will be to explain later. Charles Carter's face turned pale, and he stammered, unable to respond. Even if I forgive you, she suddenly changed her tone, her dark eyes staring straight into his, the two of you still won't end up together. Just wait and see, the obstacle isn't me. Sister, Nina Quinn sobbed, her face ashen. Charles's mother listens to you. As long as you speak up for us, she'll definitely agree. Right now, it's you, you're the biggest obstacle. If you don't give your consent, the Carter family will lose face, and my relationship with Charles will only get more complicated. Even if not for the adults, at least consider your future nephew. Please, let us go. Her lips curved slightly in a faint smirk. The way Nina spoke, so poised, was nothing like her usual self. It seemed Clara Quinn had coached her well. Begging for forgiveness? How laughable. Do you even know what shame is? My fiancé gets stolen, and somehow it's my fault. Your family causes trouble, and now you play the victim. Truly, you've turned right and wrong upside down. Nina Quinn's eyes brimmed with tears, on the verge of bursting into sobs. She looked at Vivian with grievance. What's the point of arguing about who's right or wrong now? The Quinn family's reputation is already ruined. You're part of the Quinn family too. Besides, Grandma is old and can't handle this kind of shock. Enough. The thought of how they had conspired to harm their grandmother in her past life made Vivian unwilling to engage further. There's no need to reason with me. Grandma has already endured enough. If you had any sense, you wouldn't have done this in the first place. Vivian Quinn, don't go too far. Nina Quinn lost her composure, especially when she saw Charles Carter hesitating. She immediately stepped between the two, grabbing Charles's hand, no longer bothering to hide her intentions. She looked Vivian up and down with disdain and sneered, if you were truly capable, your fiancé wouldn't have been taken from you. If two people really love each other, no one can come between them. In the end, it's all your fault. Don't blame Charles, no man in New City would want you anyway. Chapter 11, Don't think being pregnant guarantees victory, really? She sneered coldly. It had only been a day, and Nina Quinn had already switched to maternity dresses, trying to play the pitiful act. Yet, her smugness over being pregnant before marriage was unmistakable. If you're so confident, what's there to be afraid of? I obviously don't love Charles Carter. Whether he loves you or not, or if you can tear us apart, depends entirely on your own abilities. Charles Carter hadn't expected Vivian Quinn to be so blunt. Her words were like salt rubbed into a wound, leaving him momentarily speechless. Nina Quinn was furious, ignoring his attempts to stop her, and lunged forward. Slap. Vivian Quinn struck with precision, landing a slap without hesitation. The force was so strong her hand tingled slightly. The sudden action left even Helen Quinn stunned. You dare hit me? Nina Quinn stood there in shock, her ears ringing, staring in disbelief. Vivian Quinn, are you out of your mind? Helen Quinn shouted. This is outrageous. Are you trying to overturn the heavens? Slap. Vivian Quinn retaliated with another slap. This time, Charles Carter reacted quickly, grabbing her hand. What are you doing? Nina is pregnant. You know she's pregnant, yet you still brought her to a hotel. Do you care more about having fun or the baby? Vivian Quinn shook off his hand. Nina Quinn, who had initially charged forward, was now too intimidated. Vivian's sharp gaze pierced through her cousin as she sneered, stealing someone else's fiancé comes with consequences. A slap is nothing. Don't think being pregnant guarantees victory. If you dare provoke me again, don't blame me for being ruthless. Nina Quinn, either from fear or sheer anger, turned pale and said nothing. Instead, she clung to Charles Carter, crying bitterly. Helen Quinn wanted to lash out but held back, remembering Margaret Quinn's stance. Nina's marriage still required her support, so she swallowed her anger, watching Vivian calmly ascend the stairs, her head pounding in frustration. Dragging herself back to her room, Vivian Quinn took her medicine and lay down, but sleep eluded her. The fever left her body weak, but putting Nina Quinn in her place brought her some relief. A slap in her previous life, a slap in this life. She stared at her reddened hand, feeling no regret for her actions. After a moment of silence, her thoughts drifted to the conversation in the living room earlier. She truly didn't like Charles Carter. In her past life, she had been like a bird startled by a mere rustling branch, too preoccupied with survival to think about love or affection. Someone as lowly as her had no right to choose. That night, she slept poorly. A fever and cold weren't serious issues, but she kept waking up feeling nauseous, dismissing it as a symptom of her fever. However, her stomach soon began to ache dully, and her throat grew unbearably itchy. Unable to endure it any longer, she decided to get up for some water. But as soon as she opened her mouth, her throat burned like it was being cut with a knife. She vaguely felt that something was off. Opening the drawer, she carefully examined the bottle of medicine she had just taken. On the surface, it looked ordinary, just regular cold medicine. After thinking for a moment, she quietly placed the entire bottle into her bag, planning to find an opportunity to have it checked. The alarm clock rang loudly. Her mind was still foggy, and she didn't even bother checking the time, only wanting to snooze a bit longer. Not long after, her phone started ringing incessantly. Forcing herself up, Vivian groped around for her phone, her head feeling heavy as if weighed down by lead, buzzing and ringing. "Hello, Director Quinn, are you okay?" "Your voice sounds hoarse," Emma Blake asked, wondering if she had dialed the wrong number. "Are you, alright?" "Just a cold," she replied, her eyelids heavy, feeling too weak to sit up. "Has that shipment cleared customs?" "Yes, thank goodness. We managed to deliver it on time. Tell the staff to work overtime a little more," her voice became more spirited. "This time, those old board members won't have anything to say. They've been underestimating us for too long." Compared to Emma Blake, Vivian Quinn remained much calmer. "Good, go double-check everything. I'll rest a bit more." "Alright, take care and rest well. There are still some details to discuss regarding the product launch and marketing plan. I'll head to the factory this afternoon to inspect things. If there are no issues, we can start mass production." "Okay, go ahead." She touched her forehead. It seemed the fever had gone down, but why did she still feel so drained? Could it be that her body was rejecting her after reincarnation? Vivian Quinn frowned, took a deep breath, and slowly stood up. Heading to the bathroom to check, she realized, it was that time of the month. After pondering for a while, she decided to take the day off. In the past, even though it was uncomfortable during her period, it was never to the point of feeling so utterly exhausted that she couldn't even stand. Her foggy mind couldn't figure out the reason, so she lay back down. When she woke up again, the sun was already setting. She chuckled, she had slept a lot since last night. Feeling somewhat better after resting enough, she got up, put on some casual clothes, and went downstairs. "You're home." As soon as she stepped out of her room, she bumped into Clara Quinn. Clara looked surprised, glancing at her attire before asking, "Not going to work today?" Vivian Quinn nodded as a form of greeting and glanced in the direction Clara had come from. It was Nina Quinn's room. "Well, after all, you're sisters. It's only natural to visit each other often, right? Clara Quinn caught the sarcastic tone in her voice but tacitly acknowledged it. Watching Vivian head downstairs, Clara called out again, "Vi, let's find some time to talk. If it's about Nina Quinn, your family can handle it." "I have nothing to say," Vivian replied without turning back and continued down the stairs. In the kitchen, dinner was being prepared. She caught sight of Mrs. Lily, who had woken her up yesterday, carrying a bowl of what seemed to be tonic soup, likely intended for someone upstairs. "Is this for Grandma?" "Let me take it up." "Yes, second Mississippi. You don't look well. Do you need to see a doctor?" Mrs. Lily asked with concern. "Probably just because I haven't rested enough, it's nothing serious." Vivian Quinn took the tray from Mrs. Lily's hands, her weak grip almost causing it to fall, startling both of them. "Let me take care of it. If the second miss gets burned, it wouldn't be good. Why don't you take a walk in the garden for a bit? Dinner will still take some time to be ready." Seeing her silence, Mrs. Lily hesitated for a moment before stepping closer. Vivian Quinn walked to the poolside, gazing at the expansive water, her thoughts unclear. Just then, Nina Quinn returned from outside, and their eyes met. Nina immediately looked tense, hurriedly avoiding her gaze. "Coward, what are you afraid of?" Helen Quinn grabbed Nina's trembling arm, glaring at her in frustration. "If this is all the courage you've got, how are you going to survive in the Carter family in the future?" Perhaps still shaken by yesterday's punishment, Nina Quinn was unusually fearful of Vivian today, a stark contrast to her usual arrogant demeanor. Helen Quinn, too, wore a displeased expression as she dragged Nina past Vivian, muttering angrily, "What a disgrace." Vivian slightly curled her lips, watching the sunset. According to her uncle and aunt's calculations, daughters were merely pawns to be used, married off to someone who could benefit them, either wealthy or noble. Now that Nina Quinn's affair with Charles Carter had been exposed, it was certain they would clash with her in the future. The current situation was already unfavorable for her, and if Clara Quinn won another battle, her days ahead would become even more difficult. Chapter 12, Hoping for a Noble Status Through Children. Not possible in the Carter family *** because of her grandmother's persistence, even. Though the current project under her charge was a key focus of the company, there was still a long way to go to secure full control. The new product had given her some footing, but this was only the beginning. The next day, Vivian Quinn visited the department to inspect the sample trials, and the testing results were promising. Moreover, thanks to borrowing a bit of Lucas Ford's reputation at the club the other day, if nothing unexpected occurred, the next batch of deliveries should proceed smoothly. Just as she breathed a sigh of relief, Charles Carter's phone call came through. She thought for a moment but didn't answer. They had just argued last night, and him urgently reaching out didn't seem like his usual behavior. Not long after, the phone rang again, but this time it was Charles Carter's mother calling. Vivian couldn't refuse her and could already guess what she wanted to discuss. This matter had to be resolved sooner or later, so she decided to end it once and for all, agreeing to the meeting. She left work early to go home and fetch some tea, arriving at the restaurant before the appointed time. As she stepped inside, she froze. The entire Carter family was present. Were they planning to confront her outright? "Vivian, you're here. Come in, come in." Mrs. Carter warmly greeted her and led her to a seat. "Your father knew you'd be coming and was so happy that he ordered all your favorite dishes. There's no one else here today, so let's just talk comfortably." "You're too polite, Aunt. I thought it would just be the two of us, so." Vivian looked apologetically at Mr. Carter and handed the tea to Mrs. Carter. "This is Dragon Well tea, freshly made before the rain this year. I know you enjoy tea, Aunt. Please give it a try." "Wonderful, wonderful," Mrs. Carter replied, clearly pleased. "Vivian, have a seat first. Your aunt and I have something to discuss with you." Compared to Mrs. Carter's warm demeanor, Mr. Carter, as the head of the family, appeared much calmer. With a composed air typical of a businessman, he glanced sternly at Charles Carter, signaling him to pull out a chair for Vivian. The atmosphere in the room turned delicate. Mrs. Carter hesitated as if she wanted to speak, but held back, while everyone else seemed lost in their own thoughts as they sat down. "I've already heard about Charles from his mother," Mr. Carter began. "On his behalf, I apologize to you. It's my fault for not disciplining him strictly enough. This incident has brought shame to the Carter family." "You don't need to apologize, sir. This isn't your fault. Please speak directly," Vivian said as she adjusted her hair, her gaze briefly flicking toward Charles Carter, who sat silently with his head bowed. "Your aunt and I have discussed this matter. As people, we must value our commitments. Charles was engaged to you first, and no matter what foolish things he may have done, we only recognize you as our daughter-in-law." "What exactly do you mean by that?" Vivian raised an eyebrow. "Are you aware that my cousin is pregnant? You're about to have a grandchild. Didn't Charles tell you? Not just anyone can enter the Carter family." Mrs. Carter interjected, unable to tolerate the roundabout conversation any longer. "Any woman can have children, but Nina Quinn knew full well that Charles was her future brother-in-law and still behaved so disgracefully. I will never accept her. With such improper conduct, she would never settle down in the Carter family. Moreover, with someone so shameless, who even knows if the child is really Charles's." "Mother, don't say such things. How could the child belong to someone else?" Charles Carter muttered, only to stop when Mr. Carter shot him a sharp look. "Aunt, while my mother did ask you to look after me before she passed, a marriage cannot be forced," Vivian remarked calmly, studying their expressions while feeling deeply unsettled inside. In her memory, Mrs. Carter rarely spoke so harshly, even about Nina Quinn. This sudden change surprised her. After all, older generations typically value their grandchildren. Was Mrs. Carter testing her, or did she genuinely not want Nina Quinn's child? "Vivian, I'll be honest with you, and Charles, you listen carefully too," Mrs. Carter said sternly. "I see through the schemes of Helen Quinn and her daughter. Let me make it clear, I will not acknowledge this child. If they think they can use this situation to gain favor, they are sorely mistaken. That will never happen in the Carter family. Tomorrow, I'll visit grandmother, and we will resolve this engagement once and for all." "Mother?" Charles Carter's face darkened. "Are you saying you want Nina to get rid of the baby?" Vivian hadn't expected the dinner to take such a turn. She had assumed Mrs. Carter would try to persuade her to forgive Charles Carter. For a moment, she was at a loss for words. The atmosphere in the room grew stifling. She picked up her teacup and took a sip, remaining silent. "She can handle it however she wants," Mrs. Carter said coldly. "Charles, you're still young and inexperienced. Your father and I won't let you suffer. Vivian's mother entrusted her to me, and I want you to marry her not just because of that, but because she is the most suitable choice." Charles Carter wanted to argue further, but Mrs. Carter suddenly stood up, her sharp gaze fixed on him. "If you still consider me your mother, then stop seeing Nina Quinn. My son, you can only marry Vivian. That is my final decision." Her words left even Vivian stunned. While she understood the weight of old promises, Mrs. Carter's resolute stance seemed unreasonable. To reject even her own grandchild just to deny Nina Quinn entry into the family felt utterly irrational. Vivian, as an outsider with a tarnished reputation, couldn't fathom why they insisted on her being the one Charles must marry. "Mrs. Carter, everyone, please take your time chatting. I'll step out to make a phone call," she said, smiling politely. Throughout the conversation, Mr. Carter showed no unusual reaction, indicating his agreement with his wife's opinions. This made the situation even stranger. What could possibly make the two of them so unanimously aligned? Perhaps Mrs. Carter hadn't expected Vivian Quinn to remain so calm, which made her a little anxious. "Vivian, don't worry. With your uncle and me here, no one would dare to bully you. Even after the door closed, the sound of arguing inside seemed to linger. Given the circumstances, going back in didn't seem appropriate, so Vivian Quinn decided to head to the restroom instead. Unexpectedly, after wandering around for a while, things still ended up like this. If Mrs. Carter's father insisted on his stance, no matter what, Charles Carter was still their son. They might resist for a while, but ultimately, they would compromise. So then, having worked all day without eating, and now having to listen to the family's arguments, Vivian Quinn felt utterly drained. At this moment, even the thought of fine wine and exquisite dishes couldn't compare to the comfort of a steaming bowl of porridge. Hungry, exhausted, still not fully recovered, and dealing with her monthly discomfort, she hesitated for a while. She thought, maybe it's best to just leave and avoid hearing them argue any longer. Acting on her thought, Vivian Quinn left immediately. Exiting the restroom, she headed toward the main hall but moved a bit too quickly, nearly stumbling into someone. Sorry. She looked up and was slightly surprised. Mr. Ford? Lucas Ford glanced at her. Standing so close, the faint scent of tobacco on him hadn't completely dissipated, suggesting he had just come from the smoking room. Perhaps meeting friends, he was dressed quite casually, unlike his usual formal demeanor, yet he still stood out. Only someone truly confident could exude such ease. She paused, about to speak, when she noticed a graceful figure approaching. The woman was tall, seemingly a model, and the sound of her high heels echoed sharply, clearly heading in their direction. You don't look well, Lucas's deep gaze swept over her face. Are you feeling unwell? A little uncomfortable, Vivian admitted honestly. At this moment, she felt nauseous, the discomfort from the day before surging back. Before he could respond, the elegant woman in a flowing gown naturally hooked her arm around his, with an air of familiarity and disregard for others, clearly an old acquaintance. All right, let's go, she said. Vivian Quinn stared at the woman for 2 seconds, suddenly remembering something. Previously, when her company was launching a new phone model and needed a brand ambassador, this woman had been on the shortlist. However, before discussions could proceed, the woman had proactively declined, citing a busy schedule and concerns about the new product's quality, fearing it might affect her image, and so on. It truly is a coincidence, she habitually curled her lips. It seems that after her rebirth, such coincidences have become particularly frequent. Chapter 13, Every time I'm embarrassed, you're always there. Alone? He didn't let go of the girl beside him, just tilted his head slightly and asked indifferently. Vivian Quinn glanced at him briefly and calmly replied, No, I came with Charles Carter and his parents. As soon as she finished speaking, the girl next to him seemed to notice her presence for the first time but only gave her a quick look before ignoring her. Lucas, shall we go? Her tone was casual with a hint of impatience, and he didn't say anything more, leaving with the girl just like that. Vivian wasn't sure if it was her imagination, but the relationship between the two of them seemed very close, natural, as if they had known each other for a long time. In terms of appearance, they were indeed a perfect match. Yes, the girl exuded an air of nobility. Someone who dared to disregard contracts and casually cancel her role as a representative surely wasn't an ordinary artist. Could she be some wealthy heiress dabbling in the entertainment industry for fun? Vivian Quinn withdrew her gaze. This thought made her already pale complexion even more ashen. Just as she was about to collapse and sit down, a figure appeared in front of her, along with a slender, fair hand. Startled, she looked up quickly. It turned out he had come back. Mr. Ford. Hesitating for a moment, she still reached out her hand. As soon as she touched his, he pulled her up. Why did you come back? Letting go of her hand, Vivian Quinn intended to say a few polite words, but the sharp pain in her stomach came in waves, leaving her too weak to even force a smile. Realizing she couldn't hide it anymore, she gave up trying. Lucas Ford looked down at her, then raised his hand and called over a server who was stepping out of a nearby VIP room. The server quickly approached upon seeing him. "Mr. Ford, is there anything I can assist you with? Which room is Charles Carter in?" She spoke up, as he seemed ready to ask the server to fetch Charles Carter. "No need, don't bother them." Despite her pale face, Vivian shook her head and tried to muster a bright smile. "I can go by myself." Even though she had meticulously applied makeup, her exhaustion was still evident. Leaning her left hand against the wall, she tried to walk on her own, but she couldn't understand why this sudden pain had struck her. She had been perfectly fine when she left the house. After just 2 steps, her whole body swayed, and she nearly fell. He quickly caught her in his arms, completely forgetting that there were still people around watching. "I'll take you to the hospital." His deep, warm voice resonated from his chest, reaching Vivian's ears. Coupled with his steady, strong heartbeat, it gave her an immense sense of reassurance. "Should we follow them to see what's going on?" The woman who had just been clinging to Lucas Ford's arm looked excited, her gossip-loving expression somewhat mismatched with her sophisticated, cold makeup. But then again, with her beautiful features, everything she did still looked graceful. They're having a hero save the damsel moment. Why should we interfere? Loy Dunkey, standing behind her, squinted briefly before returning to his usual demeanor, teasing, "Looks like someone's charm isn't strong enough, getting abandoned so easily." "None of your business." Facing him, the woman was clearly more at ease, giving him a playful sidelong glance. "To be honest, I've never been carried bridal style before. Come here, I'll carry you." Naturally, he complied with the whims of this ancestor, ignoring her protests as he lifted her up effortlessly. He raised and lowered her a few times before mockingly saying, "You're a model, right? Maybe eat a little less. Get lost." The entire Carter family exited their private room. After the noisy argument, no one was in the mood to eat anymore. Reaching the lobby, Mrs. Carter glanced outside and let out a surprised "oh," her expression contemplative. "What's wrong?" Mr. Carter asked. "I think I saw someone from the Ford family. It looked like your 4th uncle." She hesitated, shaking her head. "I must have been mistaken. Why would it be him?" "Mom, you've never really explained, what exactly is the relationship between our family and the Ford family?" Charles Carter scratched his nose. "Our last name is Carter, so why are we so close to them? The Carter and Ford families share a history. Our ancestors fought side by side on the battlefield, and the Ford family owes their lives to ours," Mrs. Carter explained with a sigh. "Though both families transitioned from politics to business, they are worlds apart now. The Fords were already prominent back then, and today, they are even more so. Yet, they have never forgotten the debt of gratitude, which is why the two families remain close. The current head of the Ford family is your 4th uncle. Though he's young, his family rank stands firm, so it's only natural for you to address him as such. So, there's no blood relation." He sounded a bit disappointed, having hoped to leverage the Ford family to expand his connections. "That's not entirely true. The Ford family values loyalty and gratitude. Over the years, they've helped countless people, more so than some blood relatives would. If the Ford family learns about your situation with Nina Quinn, they'll look down on you, and it could hurt your future prospects," Mrs. Carter advised, her tone both caring and instructive. "As a man, your career should come first. There's no shortage of good women. Your 4th uncle may be humble, but his influence is immense. With the Ford family standing in New City's business world, a few words of recommendation from him could significantly boost your career." "Have you tried calling Vivian yet?" Mr. Carter suddenly interjected. "No one's answering. I wonder if she's angry and left," Charles Carter muttered, pouting. "She didn't even bother to say goodbye. And you still have the nerve to complain? After causing such a mess, any girl would be furious." "Let's call it a day and head home," Mrs. Carter said, her displeasure evident, though she refrained from saying more at the moment. Vivian slowly regained consciousness. The sky outside was pitch black. Remembering that she hadn't informed her grandmother she'd be late, she tried to sit up, only to realize she was hooked up to an 4-drip. The person handling the documents looked up because of the slight noise, their eyes meeting, and silence enveloped the room. Seeing that he still hadn't left, her mind went blank for a moment, then she fully recalled what had happened before she lost consciousness. He was the one who brought her to the hospital. "Looks like I have to thank you again," she sighed with a faint smile, a hint of helplessness in her tone. "It seems I'm always in embarrassing situations, and you're always there to witness them. Feeling unwell is a natural reaction, there's nothing to be embarrassed about." Lucas Ford looked at her briefly, then pressed the call button for the nurse in the hospital room. "How are you feeling now?" Vivian Quinn shook her head, her voice slightly hoarse. "Exhausted, my whole body feels drained. This time, it feels strange. It's much more severe than I expected." She paused before asking, "What did the doctor say?" "Mr. Ford." A doctor knocked on the door and, seeing her awake, approached to check on her condition. "Once this 4-drip is finished, she can go home, as long as there's no fever tonight. Make sure to come back for a follow-up." The nurse brought in the medication, and Lucas Ford stood up, heading toward the doctor's office. "As per your request, we conducted tests. The detailed report will be ready by tomorrow, but our initial assessment suggests poisoning." "Poisoning?" The man, who had been gazing out the window, turned back. "What kind of poison?" "A type of chronic poison. If the dosage is controlled well, it's hard to detect in the short term. The toxicity isn't highly reactive, and it takes a long time to show effects. However, if the patient unknowingly consumes it over an extended period, it can cause significant damage to the body, presenting symptoms that resemble allergies." The doctor explained while observing his reaction. "Fortunately, it was caught early, and the amount consumed wasn't large. This type of poison is quite rare and very expensive." Lucas Ford's indifferent expression showed no emotion. After a moment of thought, he asked, "Was this strong reaction due to recent exposure to the toxin?" "That's part of it. Additionally, each person's physical condition varies, so the reactions differ." Lucas Ford lowered his eyes, letting out a soft chuckle, though there was no trace of amusement in it. This situation was not entirely surprising to him. Having been immersed in the business world for years, he had seen countless underhanded tactics and sinister plots. Poisoning, at its core, was just another method of taking a life. But using such a method on a young girl, it truly caught him off guard. The atmosphere in the office was suffocatingly tense. The doctor appeared extremely uneasy, internally questioning if he had said something wrong. "Bring me a detailed report tomorrow," Lucas Ford said, habitually taking out a cigarette but refraining from lighting it. "For now, don't tell anyone about this." "Understood." Chapter 14. Not everyone is like Charles Carter, she can handle it herself. In the hospital room, the nurse asked attentively, to the point where even Vivian Quinn felt a bit embarrassed. She noticed that the room was quite upscale, not like a typical hospital. On her phone, there were several missed calls from Charles Carter and his mother. She sent a message back to Mrs. Carter and then turned off her phone. Casually, she asked, "May I ask, which hospital is this?" "This is Tranquil Peace Private Hospital. Normally, we only accept patients by appointment. Are you thirsty? This is owned by the Ford Group, isn't it?" Her tone was assertive, and sure enough, the nurse's eyes lit up. "Yes, it is. But this is the first time I've seen Mr. Ford. He treats you very well. And he's so handsome," the nurse thought to herself, feeling that her night shift was worth it. As soon as she finished speaking, Lucas Ford entered the room, prompting the nurse to tactfully close the door as she left. "What did the doctor say?" Vivian coughed lightly. "Just a bad cold. You're allergic to certain medications. You need to be careful with what you take in the future." He frowned slightly. "What medicine have you been taking recently?" Just some over-the-counter cold medicine. Her throat felt itchy, and she couldn't suppress a cough. After she finished coughing, Lucas Ford said, "The doctor will prescribe you some common medications to take home. If you feel unwell again, come here. Directly. Don't go anywhere else." "All right." She looked at him gratefully. Maybe those medicines were expired. "I'll be more careful next time. I can't keep troubling everyone like this. It's already late, and you have work tomorrow." He glanced at her and said slowly, "Charles Carter is your fiancé. It's his responsibility to take care of you. He's no longer my fiancé, he's about to become my brother-in-law." Vivian Quinn lowered her head, staring at the 4-needle in her hand, trying to keep her fingers still. "After all, my cousin is pregnant. Taking care of her should be his priority." He froze for a moment, quickly piecing things together, finally understanding why she had been so adamant about not contacting Charles Carter earlier. He said nothing more, glanced at his watch, and remarked, "Let's finish the 4 first. Later, I'll have my assistant take you home." "Thank you." This time, she didn't refuse. She was genuinely grateful, from the bottom of her heart. After finishing the 4, she felt significantly better, and her energy returned over the next few days as she resumed work. Vivian Quinn remembered the doctor's advice and visited the hospital again. That night, it had been too dark to notice, but today she realized that this private hospital was one of the most luxurious and expensive in New City. Only the wealthy or influential could afford to come here. The press conference for the new product launch was in preparation, and to her surprise, the model who had previously declined negotiations, someone she had coincidentally met at the hotel, had reached out, expressing her interest in representing their product. She even lowered her fee to show sincerity, a stark contrast to her arrogant attitude before. Vivian Quinn vaguely guessed the reason and deliberately looked into the model's background. There were many rumors online, but nothing concrete. Sophia Lane, remembering the way she had clung to Lucas Ford's arm, Vivian chuckled softly, "Things are getting more and more interesting." In the evening, as she returned home, she pondered. It seemed like she had never experienced an allergy from childhood until now. Could it be caused by the medicine? Suddenly remembering something, she pulled open the drawer and saw that the medications were still there. She rummaged through her bag for cold medicine and decided to take all the medications to the doctor for a checkup someday. Heading downstairs for dinner, she accidentally noticed an unfamiliar face among the servants carrying the food. "Where is Mrs. Lilly? Her family in the countryside is ill and needs her care. She probably won't return for a while." Vivian Quinn glanced around. Most of the house staff had been replaced, leaving only the caretaker for her grandmother who had been there for years. She said nothing and leisurely walked out to the garden. Nina Quinn was strolling arm in arm with Helen Quinn. This time, Nina was wearing loose overalls, looking very much like a pregnant woman. It seemed they didn't notice her, likely engrossed in their cheerful conversation, laughing heartily. The warm scene under the sunset appeared harmonious. Vivian Quinn's eyes flickered slightly as she calmly approached. As she got closer, she noticed there was another person present. "Uncle Edward?" She raised an eyebrow. "You've returned from your business trip earlier than expected this time." "Ah, Vivian, you're growing more and more beautiful," Edward Quinn said with a kind expression, gazing at her affectionately, though a glint of cunning flashed in his eyes. "And more capable by the day. People must grow and improve continuously, isn't that right, Uncle?" she replied casually, stepping forward. "You didn't even notify us of your return so the household could prepare. Was your business trip successful? Was the flight tiring? I recall it's been over a month since you left." "It went fairly well." "You're so thoughtful." "There's no need for preparation, our house has food and drink, we won't starve," Edward said with a hint of secrecy. "Oh, by the way, I brought gifts for everyone, especially for our dear Vivian." "Thank you, Uncle. I'll go inform grandmother, she said with a gentle smile. I appreciate it in advance. Dinner was lively, particularly with Nina Quinn, who repeatedly shot provocative glances at Vivian, her face smug as if she had someone backing her up. After dinner, Edward gathered everyone and distributed the gifts one by one. Margaret Quinn leisurely sipped her tea, accepted her gift, and remarked, "You've gone to too much trouble," before falling silent. "Mother, how do you like the painting I had someone bring back for you?" "It took quite some effort to obtain," Edward asked. "It's very nice," she said, setting down her teacup. "You've been thoughtful." Vivian Quinn smiled without saying a word. It wasn't until she received the gift that she realized it was an invitation card. "An invitation card?" she asked doubtfully. "Is this the secret gift you mentioned, Uncle?" "Yes, that's right. Don't underestimate this card, this isn't just an ordinary gathering," he explained. "Young people in New City love attending it. Going out to meet new friends will be good for you. Such a great opportunity should go to my elder sister." Vivian Quinn glanced at Clara Quinn, who sat gracefully nearby, her eyes subtly shifting. "I'm not good at socializing, but my elder sister is eloquent and well-connected. It would suit her better. I'm leaving for Paris tomorrow and won't be in New City for a while." "Since this is Father's thoughtful gesture, you should accept it," Clara smiled. "Who knows, you might even meet your destined one there. I've heard the requirements to attend this gathering are quite high." "Then thank you, Uncle," Vivian Quinn no longer refused, a faint smile flickering across her lips. If she remembered correctly, the participation fee for this gathering wasn't cheap. For Edward Quinn to suddenly be so generous, what exactly was he scheming? "Mother, I've heard about Nina's matter," Edward Quinn cautiously observed Margaret Quinn's expression. "Children have their plans, we should support them." She set down her teacup. "Regarding Nina, the Carter family came over today and made their stance clear to me. We'll discuss this later in the study. How did the investment negotiations go during your business trip?" "Well," he hesitated, his gaze flickering. "It didn't go very smoothly. I'm still working on it and have scheduled meetings with a few families." "Mother, why don't we talk about Nina's matter first? You've been away so long, and that's all you have to say." Margaret Quinn glared at him, her anger rising. "Useless. You come home acting like you've accomplished something, but you're utterly incapable. It's not like I didn't make any progress. I've tried contacting the young master of the Sterling family multiple times, but he keeps avoiding me. The elders in the Sterling family don't handle matters anymore, and he's like a dragon, visible one moment, gone the next. It's not that I don't want to negotiate," he tried to explain further, but seeing Margaret Quinn's increasingly dark expression, he dared not continue. "Mother, don't be angry. The Sterling family isn't our only option for investment. There are many other partnerships we can explore. The Carter family could help us too. If we become in-laws, they'll surely assist us. Plus, the Carter family has ties to the Ford family. With the Ford family's backing, everything will be easier," Helen Quinn quickly mediated, shooting Edward Quinn a meaningful glance. "Isn't that right, Edward? The Carter family does indeed want to form an alliance with us," Margaret Quinn replied slowly. Seeing the family's joyous expressions, she snorted and continued, "But the person they want to marry isn't Nina, it's Vivian." "Impossible." Nina Quinn stood up in shock. "I don't believe it. Grandma, you're lying to me. Charles Carter's mother personally told me today." "Why would I lie to you? The Carter family values promises and considers them part of their family traditions. Anyone who tries to climb the social ladder through underhanded means won't be accepted, even if they're pregnant. Especially someone with ulterior motives, they wouldn't be able to manage the household even if they married in." Most importantly, Margaret Quinn looked at Nina, who was fuming and ready to confront someone, and shook her head. "Nina, not everyone is like Charles Carter. Outsiders often see things more clearly than those involved. You should reflect on this yourself. Chapter 15, The Man is Truly Charming. Mother, what does the Carter family mean by this? What about the baby in Nina's womb? Helen Quinn couldn't believe that things had fallen apart at the last moment. Ignoring whether her words were harsh or not, she pulled Edward Quinn to his feet, demanding an explanation from Margaret Quinn. Why do they insist on choosing Vivian? I'm not convinced. There must be another reason behind this. Which grandparents wouldn't want a grandchild to hold? Vivian's reputation is a mess, and I don't believe the Carter family has anything to gain from her. Nina is in no way inferior to her. You've always favored Vivian since she was a child, saying she's pitiful for being an orphan. Now, even with such a life-changing matter, you're still biased toward her. Do you want Nina to get an abortion? I won't allow it. Margaret Quinn furrowed her brows. Do you think I'm secretly sabotaging this and disagreeing with the marriage? Mother, Helen didn't mean that. We're just anxious, that's all. Please don't be upset. We just don't understand why, even at this point, you insist on Vivian marrying into that family. Edward Quinn dared not be firm with the old lady. His position as CEO was still unstable, and he currently relied on her support. I've already explained the reasons clearly. I'm tired now, you two can carry on. She glanced at Vivian Quinn, who stood quietly beside her. Child, come with me to the study. Vivian smiled faintly, nodded, and helped the older woman upstairs. Edward, I called you back urgently, and yet you're saying nothing. Nina is your daughter. This marriage with the Carter family, whether they agree or not, it must happen. Helen Quinn glared angrily upstairs, her heart burning with hatred. How could that wretched Vivian Quinn still hold the upper hand at this point? If I argue with Mother, do you think she'll side with me? For this to work, the only way is for our dear niece to back out voluntarily. Edward Quinn stroked his chin. We can only start with her. Since Charles Carter's mother favors her so much, only her words will hold any weight. Don't forget, although your younger brother is gone, all his shares were left to that wretched girl. If the old lady adds her portion to it, and with the Carter family's backing, once she rises to power, we won't have a moment of peace. Helen rambled on endlessly. Clara Quinn, who had been sitting silently nearby, suddenly changed her expression. Standing up, she said, Father, Mother, I'm going to rest now. I have an early flight tomorrow. Clara, you're the most resourceful. Think of a way to help your sister, Edward Quinn said, always holding this eldest daughter of his in high regard. For some reason, he could never quite figure out what was on her mind. Despite her youth, she always seemed so inscrutable. When it comes to benefits, who would willingly yield? Clara Quinn paused, her face momentarily showing a hint of disdain. To gain something, you have to give something up. In the study, Margaret Quinn sighed, looking apologetically at Vivian Quinn. Those words earlier were actually meant for you to hear. I know, Grandma. The golden era of the Quinn family has passed. Over the years, it's been in constant decline. Although it's a long-established enterprise with a solid foundation, restoring its former glory will take a long journey. Vivian's lips curved slightly as her fingers lightly traced the edge of the desk. She couldn't bear to see her aging grandmother still worrying about the company. But if she were to marry Charles Carter, wouldn't it be the same as her previous life? I don't understand why the Carter family insists on having me, but marrying Charles Carter feels like inviting a wolf into the house. Regarding the investment, I'll give it another try. Don't you realize that getting married under these circumstances is a huge sacrifice for you? Let me be honest with you, our new project is a do-or-die battle. Over the years, the subsidiaries of the Quinn Corporation have all been operating at a loss. The profitable ones not only have to sustain themselves but also cover the losses of others. If the transformation fails, the workers who have been with us for so many years will end up unemployed. Margaret Quinn spoke with a heavy heart. Seeing her like this, Vivian felt distressed and consoled her with a few words before heading back to her room to call Emma Blake. Investigate the Sterling family's background, as detailed as possible. Director Quinn, the current head of the Sterling family, rarely makes appearances. Years ago, after taking over the business, he almost completely disappeared from the public eye, delegating everything to someone named Robert Pattinson. A fox? It's Pattinson as in the old moon, Robert as in standing upright. But this person is indeed fox-like, extremely cunning and difficult to deal with. It's said he loves visiting bars,